So welcome to Contra Gentile Season 3, Episode 2. Should we banter? Banter?
Sure.
Okay. I was going to tell you something and I forgot. Damn, never mind.
Yeah.
It was about a black lady. I don't remember. Anyway, I had some story about a black lady earlier today, and I forgot it. I need to jot down what stories I need to tell.
Yeah, I did the podcast with the Negroes this past week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, they wanted me on it.
How'd that go?
It went really well, actually. Yeah, they
What did you
enjoyed
guys
it
talk
a lot.
about?
A variety of things.
Where do they put it out?
They haven't put any out yet.
Why do people do that? That's very
I
common.
don't know. Yeah,
it's very common.
I think they like to filter out which episodes they're going to put out. They don't really trust their gut. And so, it's just the way that
They've had to have recorded dozens.
They did a lot so far. But like Wesley is only happy with like 2 of them. And the other guy thinks that 2 that Wesley likes are too boring. And so it's like, I just don't think they're in agreement.
So it's almost like they're approaching podcasting by like how you would make an album.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And so then they think if they just have a collection and then they're going to put it out every week once they could agree on which episodes and shit like that. So
they're going to put it out every week for like a month?
Yeah. For right now, but I think they're trying to get like a whole season's worth of episodes.
That's going to take a long time.
Yeah, I think they were saying that they might release it like in the summer.
Oh, wow.
Or whatever. And so, I mean, it's the way that they're doing it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty enjoyable.
I know nothing about it, so I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's called Off the Scale, and so it's like, I don't even know.
Sounds like it could be a weight loss podcast.
I think that's what it first was supposed to be, like
was literally
working out.
Oh, okay, so that is
like a working out type of thing. But then it just became more of a conversation of fixing your life because like they went to jail and all that stuff, and so. And then now it's just becoming a bullshit one. So it's like transforming into.
Well, it takes a long time.
It does,
and
yeah.
It might be interesting. I guess the one benefit of never putting it out ever is that it becomes what it is, and then once it's what it is, you can start putting it out.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Instead of going through a year and a half worth of not knowing.
Yes. Yeah.
All of our episodes are incredible, but.
Yeah.
There's that kind of like process of
course there was
learning what your show is that I guess you could avoid.
Yeah.
If you just don't ever put it out.
But yeah, they kind of enjoyed the conversation. A lot about race, talking about.
Of course.
Yeah. Whether the categories that's being used now are in any way legitimate and stuff like that. Which is pretty interesting. Yeah. For people that have never really
discussed. Talk about the Whoopi Goldberg thing?
No, we didn't actually, no.
Okay. We don't necessarily need to.
But. But we have more interesting take than whatever. Hey, we're saying, you got to counter her. You got to play by the same rules. If you do that with the left, you got to do that with the right or whatever. And it's kind of like, I don't know. It's just not an interesting conversation the way people are having it. If they really want to have a discussion on whether, Nazism was actually just about the Jews, that's an interesting conversation then to have.
Yeah.
Like, it was it. I mean, they killed a lot of other people.
Yeah.
They killed gays. They killed
gypsies,
degenerate artists,
handicapped people,
Christians,
mm-hmm.
A lot of Catholics. And so it was like they kind of attacked a lot of people.
They made some very spectacular posters about the Jews.
Right.
Das
yes.
Juden and stuff and all that.
Yeah. And the Nazis themselves constituted the Jews a different race, but that was kind of their propaganda because, throughout history, the Jews were still constituted as people that came from the Caucasus Mountains. And these categories are old. Yeah. And so they never, even though they separated like the Jews and the Gentiles and stuff, but in terms of their race, they knew that they were the same. They weren't like the Negroids or the Asians. It's like you had these distinctions, and so the Germans kind of isolated themselves. It's like, we're not like them, they're not like us. The Jews are their own race and they're inferior and they're the Untermensch, while the Aryans were the Übermensch. And so it was like they did have the philosophy of race, and so obviously in that sense within their framework it would be, but in actuality I think it was more of an ideological distinction in which they wanted to eradicate anybody that disagreed with them.
Or wasn't them.
It wasn't them, right? Yeah. And I did think they thought that the German people, the Saxon people, were the superior humans. And that's definitely true. But, no, not that they're superior. No,
somebody's going to soundbite that.
That they believe
that's definitely
true.
The
Saxons, I mean.
I was like, wait, that's not at all what you've ever.
But they also didn't like the Brits. Right? I mean, they hated the Brits. They thought the Brits were inferior. Yeah.
The French.
Yes, they weren't the same as them.
All the Slavs they hated.
Yes, yeah. And so, I mean, that could be an interesting conversation, but whenever you hear them talking about it in any of the, more popular podcasts or I don't even know what to call the Daily Wire anymore. It's not really a podcast. They're kind of like...
Well, it's a podcast news network.
Yeah, I guess so.
News network.
Right, yeah. But they're much bigger now. They're a production company. They make movies.
Yeah.
They make talk shows. They make everything. So it's like it really is. I remember, I think I was asking Josh this before. I was like, to what point does something like that gain enough popularity where you could constitute them as part of the mainstream? And I really do think the Daily Wire now really is part of the mainstream.
That kind of defines it in a way.
Right.
It really is.
They're a large corporation. They're a large company. And they produce a variety of different type of shows. Some of them are more commentary. They have that Morning Wire now.
Have you ever listened to that?
That's strict. No, I haven't actually. But it's like strict news apparently. Like there's no opinion on that one. Just strict news on things will happen. And then they have like the weekly Andrew Klavan show, which is not really like the other ones. It's a bit different.
It's monologue-y.
Yeah, it's more monologue-y. And then obviously Candace Owens is like a Oprah type of show. Yeah. I mean, and now they're releasing movies and producing movies. Okay, at what point can you stop pretending to be the little guy? You're not the little guy anymore. You're part of the mainstream.
We're taking on the mainstream media. It's like, no, you're part of it.
Yeah, you're part of it now, right? And it's fine. I think
you have different views than most of it.
Yes, yeah, they have different views, and I think they're still better than CNN and all of them.
Oh yeah,
I have no problems with that. But I guess just like the presentation of calling themselves like the little guy that's taking on the mainstream media, I think is kind of silly now. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, they're part of it now. They're
the fact that they like swayed an election in Virginia with
ease
is like, like, wow, we can't believe we did that. It's like, well, you are the Daily Wire.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're big. Yes. You had a good Jew guy coming in, and they know how to make money, and he did well, and that's good for them, right?
Oh yeah.
But I think it's the false humility and like the false dichotomy of
the underdog narrative.
I think is tiring. It's old. It's like, just stop. Just again, this is what I loved about Trump. Yeah. It's like, just say I'm awesome. Okay, fine. Yes, you guys, you kicked ass. All right. Not even the Young Turks came out way before them, and they just went well beyond the Young Turks. I mean, that's how big the Daily Wire is. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, they kicked ass, and just say we kicked ass.
I've never seen the Young Turks ever.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have.
I never have.
Yeah.
Is it the Chink?
Yeah, Chink and
Uyghur.
And that one chick, what's her name?
I have no idea.
Oh, I forgot her name, but her famous line, which is like, "I am better than you. I'm better than everyone." It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Awesome.
Oh, Anna Krispy Kreme. I always call her that because I can't remember her last name. Kasparian.
I was going to say Kasparian.
Yeah.
That sounds.
She's
Armenian.
She is Armenian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Armenians. Anyway, my story about the black lady, I don't know. Well, that was Whoopi. That's a black lady.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we have not done the wine yet.
Yes.
It's our record. We're 9 minutes in. Today, we have a Domaine Serene Yamhill Cuvée Willamette Valley Pinot Noir 2017. I don't know if that's going to catch, but Anchorage now has an alcohol tax. So if you buy a $40 bottle of wine, it ends up being like $45.
That's pretty ridiculous.
I know. Well, I don't know what the reasoning would be behind that, but
I don't know.
Because
Anchorage has one of the strictest city laws for alcohol in the nation, so.
Cheers. Oh, it smells good.
Yeah, it's good. I like that one. It's better than last week's.
Oh, yes. It's extremely delicate.
Yeah.
But it's flavorful.
That's an easy wine to drink on its own without any food.
Yes. All right, so today I make no promises as to length of discussion. Last week, people kind of crapped themselves a little bit when they saw how long the episode was, just in what, like, in regards to what we discussed and for how long.
Yeah.
I was getting lots of direct messages.
Oh, really? Negative or positive?
Very positive, but they're like, I have to listen to that again. It was so much information.
Yeah.
Today's topic will be quite a bit more focused on a line of argumentation.
Mm-hmm.
It is Aristotle's De Anima, which there's no idea to know when in his life he would have written this, right? Not really.
No, not really.
Yeah. But he lived, I think he died in 330 BC, 330, 320.
Right, yeah.
Just like 300 years before Christ or something.
Yeah.
You have kind of an intro you want to give?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Yeah, I think it just kind of, like I mentioned to you earlier, was a lot of people don't know that most of Aristotle's major works have been completely destroyed, and they've never been translated. And a lot of it did have to do with some of the early heretics, the early Christian heretics, who did not like any of the Greek influence infiltrating a lot of their, a lot of the religion. Obviously, that began with Christianity. And so, yeah, a lot of them got burnt, but there were things written about them, at least by some people that did read it early on. And so there are things that we know of his writings, but a lot of the stuff that was actually saved much later, around, I think, the 600s-700s by the Mohammedans. And
very early on.
Yeah, and so it was like their golden era, and they actually found the manuscripts, and they began to be the ones who translated. And so I think what is understood about like these texts, like the Ta Metaphysicus and the Physicus and the De Amina and these texts these were his general outlines normally used for academic purposes.
Okay.
And so that was one of the reasons why it was more easily found. And so, like Aristotle famously was the tutor of like Alexander the Great and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it was like these kinds of more general texts that was normally used for teaching. But his more in-depth work are all gone, and they're never going to be recovered. And some of them were just through war, when Alexander the Great had the war with the Persians, like a lot of the stuff just got destroyed through that, and so it wasn't just people nefariously trying to destroy it. It was, he existed in a time period where many of the there were a lot of wars happening, and there was a lot of other shit going on, and so it's unfortunate, but that's just really what the case is. All right, so in terms of the content, I realized when I was reading it, some of the translations can be difficult to begin to comprehend what Aristotle means. And really, this is going to be helpful when we start getting into like actually reading Aquinas and stuff, is what is really meant by the translated word the soul. And so, obviously the word soul is not Greek, nor is it Latin, right? That's a Germanic word. I think it was like sola, that refers back to more of the heathenistic ideas of the centrality of the nature of man. Mm-hmm. And so, the soul, I think, in the contemporary world, kind of more takes on this more heathenistic or Cartesian understanding of what it is, right? Like there's this invisible individual, which is you, that enters the body, and then the body is being driven by the soul. And so we normally have this type of language. We talk about us having arms, right? Like I have arms, I have legs, I have a head, I have my body, that there is an I that is prior to your body, and that you in some way control that body as like this ghost-like figure that either exists in way back in the mind or just throughout the body, or whatever kind of like I guess Cartesian view of the soul. And so when you're reading Aristotle, it's very easy to kind of get lost or get kind of confused exactly what he means, because if you have that understanding where you have this Cartesian soul or you have this heathenistic soul,
meaning materialistic?
No, not even materialistic. It's just like this dual substance reality.
Oh, okay.
It's that there's the immaterial substance that is this invisible.
Pretty much everything that is theological, but not this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So if you talk to the everyday Christian, you go to a Protestant church or whatever, and you ask most of them, are you your soul, or do you have a soul, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They normally just give you a quasi understanding of what that really means, but it normally comes down to the soul being a subject. And I think this is what we kind of need to clear out before we get into the rest of the document. So, the Latin word anima and the Greek word psyche, or psyche, that Aristotle was using, doesn't really refer to any substance, right? There's only one substance. The substance is a combination of form and matter. Mm-hmm. And so what is exactly the anima? What is that? It is not an object, but rather it is a principle. Mm-hmm. It is a act. Like if you're going to put it into any kind of understanding, it's an act. And so, like the term animation derives from anima, and animation is defined as the act of animating, right? Mm-hmm. That is what an animation is. And so a lot of times when I read it, I just replace the word soul with animation. Okay. And it begins to make a little more sense, because
that which moves the body.
That which moves the body, right? So it's a power. And so understanding the soul as a power.
That was actually one question, is that at some point he starts to delineate the powers of the soul, and obviously that's for quite a bit later, but how is power defined in this context?
Yeah, the power in this context is defined as the actualization of a potential, basically. And so you have certain powers, and the powers that you have is different than that of an inanimate object. And so in the contemporary world, we use the term inanimate very commonly, right? Like if you take a drawing class, it's like draw an inanimate object first. And so we kind of get that. We understand that it's things that aren't alive, right? A rock, a table, whatever. These things are inanimate. And so, in Aristotle's view, there's also this counterpart that there's animate. So there's inanimate objects and there's animate objects. The animate objects are ones that have life, that are alive. And so the ones that are alive have different type of powers than inanimate objects. Mm-hmm. Not to say that the inanimate objects are powerless. It isn't, for a rock has hardness. And so there's a certain power in its structure of being hard. But an animate object has much more powers than any kind of inanimate object does, right? And so when they talk about the psyche or the anima, this is what they're referring to, that there are powers within your structure, within your reality, and these powers are what constitutes you as being alive. Mm-hmm. So this is what it is. And so referring to the soul as a substance is false. That's not what he means. And the more that we could get away from that word, I think it's the same way that
soul.
Yeah, the more we get away from the word, the easier he is to comprehend. So a lot of times, just replace it with animation, or replace it with power, replace it with life, whatever it is. But that's what he's referring to. It's like, you're just talking about the qualities of what it means to be alive, and what kind of powers do living creatures have as opposed to non-living creatures. Mm-hmm. And these powers are what constitutes your existence. Mm-hmm. And as being animal, right? Because the word animal comes
it's
from...
that which actualizes your existence as an animal.
Yes, because the word animal comes from that which is animate, mm-hmm. right? So back then, an animal was everything that was animated, right? So bees, worms, beasts, humans, plants, they're all animals because they're all animated things. Mm-hmm. Now we kind of use the word animals to refer to
a class
of animated things that aren't plants, really, because basically you have vegetative animation, and then everything else is constituted as animals. Now I think they constitute bugs as animals, right? in the modern biology books.
I don't know.
Yeah, they might not do that. And so maybe anything besides bugs, insects and plants now are considered as animals because they call humans animals and they call, dogs animals.
Which is not technically wrong.
It isn't, right, yeah, because we're animated.
But the reasons they're calling humans animals.
Right, it's different, right? Because now they
do it. They would call a human an animal now in saying that there's no qualitative difference between people and
because before they
dogs.
called them beasts. And so beasts were the animals that only had the vegetative and the sensory powers, but they didn't have the
nutritive.
Yes,
sensory.
Yeah, and so they didn't have they didn't have the intellectual powers, and so those were beasts. And then man was the animal that had the rational powers.
It's a rational animal.
Yeah,
which Aquinas will cover sometime. But so we start. So what? This is written in 3 books. Mm-hmm. The first being essentially an articulation of most of the argumentation posited before his writing this. It's a explanation of there's a long list of this is what this guy thought. This is what this guy thought.
Yeah, it's pretty similar basically to what Phaser's book was.
Yes, it's very that first section was very interesting.
Yeah.
Cuz he starts by saying things like, is the soul a unity? Mm-hmm. Is it? He's throwing out all of the questions that would be asked.
Yes.
Is the soul a unity? Does it have separate parts? Mm-hmm. What are the parts? Where are the parts?
Yeah.
Are they material? Mm-hmm. Are they not material? We would say material and immaterial. He would say composed of elements.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And what would be the opposite of that in Aristotelian language? There's composed of elements, and then I don't know what you would...
Simple, I guess.
What?
Simple would be the opposite of it.
Yeah.
Because composed of elements means that it's composite, and a simple thing would just be non-composite. It would be,
which means it's an element or... Not, yeah. Okay. He talks about, is it quale or quantum? Quale would be quality, just a quality. Mm-hmm. So the quantum... What is a quantum in this context?
I think just quantity.
Quantum? Okay. Mm-hmm. So, quantum or quale. So, the bricks, the quale would be that they're red, that they're blah, 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 whatever shape, whatever size.
Yeah.
And then quantum is how many there are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he I
thought
it was...
one text that's really helpful for this is his Aristotle's Predicables. Mm-hmm. Some translation calls Aristotle's categories, but he kind of goes down the list of all those things. And so there's quality, there's quantity, there's habit, there's...
And I will say the translation we have was written by J.A. Smith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he died in 1939, and he was a British idealist. Mm. So this translation is flavored...
Yeah, with that kind of language.
Like Constance Garnett's early translation of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and stuff.
Right,
there's a little bit of a flowery. I don't think this is flowery.
Yes,
but there's a little bit of a style.
The British flair to it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a... I think it's very attractively written.
Yeah.
But it could be written more plainly.
Yeah.
To be a little more... what is viz?
Vis-a-vis.
I don't think so. I looked it up.
In the British?
V-I-Z?
Yeah.
No, that'd be V-I-S. Viz, meaning it's vidarete.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
It's constantly used.
Yeah.
Viz, meaning. And I don't know.
Yeah, in other words.
Yeah.
Use an introduction, a gloss of explanation, yeah.
V-I-Z.
So it's like vis-a-vis. It's like... In other words, this.
Oh, so vis-a-vis would be the French of this.
Yeah.
Because it's from Latin.
It is, yes, yeah.
Okay, so viz is the English version of vis-a-vis.
Yeah.
And it means it's the abbreviation of another abbreviation of a Latin phrase that says...
Yeah.
Knowing this follows.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Or a further explanation. In other words, this, and then you give a further explanation.
Okay. So is it worth going through the?
I think what's interesting is that a lot of those arguments obviously is correlated with our contemporary
yes.
issues.
So Democritus is he's the guy that came up with the atomic theory, right?
Yeah.
And he reduces the soul to matter.
Yes, yeah.
To atoms.
Yes, to atoms, yeah.
Which are the elements, essentially.
Yeah.
The particles of the elements.
Yeah, the smallest uncuttable part. And so he reduces it down to that the psyche, that the animating principle has to be a physical object.
And there's... And then what? The Pythagoreans...
Yeah.
Did they reduce the soul to mathematical? That was the part to me where I was like, I don't understand.
I think a very easy way to understand that in the contemporary world is just quantum mechanics. Mechanics is a mathematical equation. And so when you actually look at quantum theory, it's all math. And so the
that doesn't tell me how you can reduce soul to math.
Because you're saying so in quantum theory it's about the wave function, and so you literally have a wave function, a mathematical equation of the placements of electrons, and that fundamentally you could reduce all things down to this wave function. And so the Pythagoreans were saying the same thing. They were saying that you could reduce everything down, that you can't reduce it down to a particular matter, but you could reduce it down to a function of the way matter works, and matter works mathematically. And so you could reduce it down to mathematical equations of how things work, how things function. Like a lot of modern physics are very Pythagorean in their thought. Is that they don't really many modern physicists do not reduce things down to a substance, rather they reduce.
And this is why you say that contemporary physics are pre-Socratic.
Yeah, they're very pre-Socratic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because they reduce it down to the relation between objects, which is normally a certain kind of function. And so the Pythagoreans that's what they were essentially saying. It wasn't that you could reduce down to an atom, but you could reduce it down to the way atoms behave. And atoms behave in certain order and properties that are mathematical in nature.
I think it's very interesting that what we were saying last time, that you can reject dualism and materialism in favor of hylomorphism.
Right.
He literally says, he says, the essence of a house is assigned in such a formula as a shelter against destruction by wind, rain, and heat. The physicist would describe it as stones, brick, and timbers. But there is a third possible description which would say that it was that form in that material with that purpose or end. Which then among these is entitled to be regarded as the genuine physicist? The one who confines himself to the material, or the one who restricts himself to the formulable essence alone? Yeah. Is it not rather the one who combines both in a single formula? Yeah. This is literally the argument people are having now. Yeah, 2,300 years after this was written.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read this in like 4 days, so I'm trying to compress everything. I mean, I know you've probably gone through this many times, but
yeah.
Who is Anaxagoras?
Anaxagoras, he was one of the Milesians.
What are they?
So the Milesians were they constitute them as the father of Western philosophy. Okay. So it was Thales, Anaximenes, Anaximander. Anaxagoras, I guess, was kind of after them, but
they continued there.
Yeah, kind of continued on all that. Yeah.
So Democritus reduces soul to atoms, which means particles of the elements. Can we say? Pythagoreans reduce the soul
to mathematical functions.
It's like, the doctrine of the Pythagoreans seems to rest upon the same ideas. Some of them declared the motes in air. Mm-hmm. Motes are what again?
Like just the properties of a substance. Yeah, whatever the properties are. Yeah.
So that soul is reduced to some quality of air.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Others that what moved them to be soul, these motes were referred to because they are seen always in movement. It just makes like a mathematical argument.
Yeah.
How would Anaxagoras?
What does he quote for that one?
Okay, so similarly also Anaxagoras and whoever agrees with him in saying that mind set the whole in movement declares the moving cause of things to be soul. Mm-hmm. His position must, however, be distinguished from that of Democritus. Democritus roundly identifies soul and mind, which would mean that they're the same thing.
Right, yeah.
Okay. For he identifies what appears with what is true. That is why he commands Homer for the phrase Hector. This is the weird thing when these philosophers and physicists refer to poetry. I'm like, I don't know what that means.
I mean,
I have no idea what that means.
The reason is because Homer you have to think of him like Moses for the Jews.
He's literally their
Yeah, like he was a prophet.
Oh, okay.
And like
when Aquinas is making arguments and like references the Bible verse,
yes, it's
the
same
thing. Oh,
yeah,
okay. He Democritus does not employ mind as a special faculty dealing with truth, but identifies soul and mind.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? First of all, so he does not employ mind as a special faculty dealing with truth, but identifies soul and mind. So both soul and mind.
I guess
soul as a form.
He's not set.
Okay.
I guess he's not saying that the intellective properties of a human person is really, I guess, a unique or special feature.
Okay, so okay, because mind is specific to humans.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the problem. Is he like goes like Democritus says, and then he doesn't explain what Anaxagoras thinks. He'll like explain it later.
Right,
but he doesn't just go, this is what they both think right next to each other.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll have to go and figure out what Anaxagoras has to say later. But he really didn't like Empedocles.
Yeah.
He kept referencing Empedocles and why he was wrong over and over. I started to circle every time he said Empedocles.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Who was Empedocles? What was his? Do you know?
I'm not fully aware of what his.
Okay. One second. Can I? Where did I don't know. Plato, in the way Plato in the Timaeus fashions soul out of his elements for like he holds is known by like, and things are formed out of the principles or elements so that soul must be so too. What was Plato's? Because that was a lot of Aristotle's work was done in correcting Plato.
Right. Yeah.
So what was?
Because he was.
Can you contrast Plato and?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference is that Plato really did theorize the independent nature of the soul, of the psyche.
Okay.
And so like I think you sent me that quote, and so that quote essentially he was simply saying that what Plato is presenting is a theory where you have this world of forms, and in this world of forms where the mind and the intellect, the soul exists, and that this thing is independent and separate from the body. And so this is what he really wants to kind of eradicate, is this notion. He doesn't really want to eradicate like the tripartite nature that Plato theorizes about the soul, that you have the appetite, you have the because if you read like Nicomachean Ethics, he kind of brings that up quite a bit.
Well, he doesn't here too.
Yeah. But like a lot of his moral theory is based on the tripartite nature of the soul. So he's not rejecting much of the description of the soul in that sense.
So it's like the idea of like a tripartite nature of like eating as a, or is that specifically in reference to soul?
The tripartite nature is both referred into the nature of being and the soul.
Because he makes like an argument where like when you eat there is that which is eaten. Or when you feed, it's that which is fed.
Yeah.
That which does. It's like that's what that which is fed upon. That which does the eating, and that which is fed. Yeah, stuff like that. That'll be later.
Yes,
but
he does reference that. But a lot of that. Actually
I don't know if that's the same tripartite.
No,
okay.
that was actually more in reference to the process of actimpotency. And so
or that which actualizes that which,
right. Yes.
Okay. Then we have Diogenes, of which you are a fan. So tell me why you're a fan of Diogenes.
I'm not a fan of him, but there were many people that have told me, including some of my former students, that they believe that if I were
a philosopher, you would be Diogenes.
If I were like not a family person, that I would be, even till now, existing like Diogenes.
So what's his thing?
So yeah, I mean, the Diogenes was just kind of famous for being kind of crazy. And so he was willfully homeless. He basically lived in this.
Can I have the bottle opener?
Yeah. He lived like in this barrel, where they make wine and stuff. And so like he had his own little barrel that he lived in, and he would just do weird things to kind of creep people out, like defecate in public, like piss on people, masturbate in front of people, and then he would and then like one of the famous stories was that Diogenes was not a fan of Socrates at all, and Plato, Platonic theory.
Yeah.
And so,
they were contemporaries.
Yes, yeah.
Socrates and Diogenes.
Yes, yeah. And so one of the Socratic theories was that human beings were, featherless bipeds. And so the categories, how we categorize human beings as mammals.
Yeah.
And so one of his categories was that, there's only a few animals that walk on two legs, and that's birds, and then that's humans. And so we were actually featherless bipeds. We were mostly related genetically to birds, and that's his idea. And so one day he kind of stormed into one of his lectures, and he had a dead, fully plucked chicken. He was like, "Look, I have a human here." He kind of threw the dead bird on the ground just to make fun of him, because he thought that was a ridiculous explanation of what it means to be human.
Socrates said that we were featherless bipeds.
Yeah, that we were featherless. Yeah, Plato and Socrates had that theory.
Weird.
Yeah. And so that was something that Diogenes really disagreed with. Like other famous stories was when, what's his name? Alexander the Great, when he was already the emperor, one time was walking around the city, and he went to talk to Diogenes, and then Diogenes said, "You're in the way of my son. Can you move, please?" So he was just kind of a dick and everything. And so
that would be you. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Like he has no reverence to any emperor.
Yeah.
He just lived the way that he did. And so, I think that's why people relate Diogenes with myself.
Your irreverence.
Yes, my irreverence.
But Diogenes would say that soul is in air, or it consists of air, because air is the finest of grain.
Yes, yeah.
And a primordial element, and therefore cognitive or something.
Yeah, I mean, he was more of the tradition of the Milesian.
So what's the Milesian tradition? You've mentioned.
So the Milesian tradition was materialist, and they were one of the first philosophers, and they rejected the Homeric tradition. And one of the most famous things was like Thales reduced fundamentally all things down to water, because water is it's a sustaining of life, and so on and so forth. And so there was even images that were drew, because I believe Thales also theorized that the world was spherical. And so there's images where he had the spherical Earth in a tub of water, like the space was just all water everywhere. And then there was Anaximenes and Anaximander, who theorized that reality was fundamentally some kind of mist, and so there was this mist of and I think this is more closer to what Diogenes thought. And so some other translations say air.
It's more like vapor.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not really air.
Because
in the way
vapor partakes of both air and water.
Yes,
or something.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it was like this.
So maybe really quick, we should explain the physics of the time.
Yeah.
And how it was explained, how physics was conducted.
How is it? What do you mean?
Air, water, fire, earth, all that. Where it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot.
It does. Yes.
And because you're saying air, and they're like, what does that even mean? That reality is a mist. It's you have to understand their physics.
Yes, yeah. And so, I mean, it was just breaking things down to the more fundamental elements. It's like Captain Planet. You have air, earth, water, fire.
That's it.
And heart. That wasn't Captain Planet. He was that Hindu kid. What the fuck? Heart.
I know.
But so those are just the fundamental elements of corporeal bodies. And so with those fundamental elements, the Milesians were attempting to describe reality without the gods. And so you have the Homeric tradition, and Homer obviously wrote about the gods. And the Milesians were rejecting all the narratives of the gods and simply saying that we can comprehend reality through the observation of reality. And so you have elements. How can we break them down? And that if these are the more fundamental parts of the elements of reality, are these elements, then what can these other things in our reality be assigned to, right? And so the Milesians obviously were before the theory of atoms, but Democritus, when they began to theorize the atoms, they were going even beyond the basic elements and saying that even those elements are composed of smaller parts, which would be the atomos. And then obviously that was the basic theory up until Einstein, and he said that then it's not just the atoms, but there's the subatomic particles. And then the subatomic particles are what's the smallest uncuttable part. And I think that's what we still hold to today, is that the smallest uncuttable parts are protons, electrons, and neutrons. And that, and so they were theorizing that we have to find it at least in the elements of reality. So the psyche has to be associated with one of the elements because it cannot exist outside of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because we are in the part where we're... Aristotle would say the number of principles is also in dispute. Some admit only one, or one only, others assert several.
Yeah.
So it's whether or not the soul is singular in its nature, or not in its nature, but in its function almost, or its power.
Yes, in its power, yeah.
Or whether it has many.
Yes, yeah.
Heraclitus is one of the... was it... I can't remember I keep thinking, what's the
Heraclitus and Parmenides?
Parmenides. I keep thinking Empedocles. I was like, that's
yeah.
Is Heraclitus the one that we just have like sentences that he wrote?
Kind of, yeah.
Or is that
both Heraclitus and Parmenides, there's not much that we know of their specific writings.
We just know that they're traditions.
But so many people wrote about them. And so that's how we have so much information.
Because Heraclitus makes no sense to me at all.
Yes, and so Heraclitus is the constant change and flux guy. And so he's the one that says that the element that things can be reduced down to is fire. And so that's the element that he chooses. But why does he choose that? He chooses that because fire is never stable, it's never stagnant. And so he doesn't believe that there's any univocal principle in reality.
It never holds one shape or one...
Yes, yeah. And so reality in itself is always chaotic. He doesn't believe in a unification of being, that there is no being, that there's just quantity.
It's like a soup of change constantly.
Yes, yeah.
Because what he says is that that the first principle, the quote-unquote warm exhalation,
yes, yeah,
of which, according to him, everything else is composed, is soul.
Yeah. And
then it just talks about how this exhalation... that this exhalation is most incorporeal and in ceaseless flux, that what is in movement requires that what knows it should be in movement, and that all that is has its being essentially in movement.
Yes.
And when we say change, it's essentially synonymous with what they mean with movement.
Yes, yeah.
So that the soul is nothing specifically ever.
Yeah.
It's just constantly changing.
Yes. And so you see the interesting thing about like reading some of the pre-Socratics and everything is that we could find its equal counterpart in the contemporary world. And that's what I kind of like to do more, because rather than reading it historically, it's trying to understand its principle. Like the principle can be applied in any epoch in history, including now. So the principle of Heraclitus is that there is no such thing as the soul. There is no animating principle. There is simply constant change and motion.
Which is Heraclitean.
Yeah, which is Heraclitean.
Clit.
Yes. And so, again, within the contemporary world, there are physical theorists that theorize this. Yeah. That there is actually no state of reality.
And that's the theory of relativity, essentially.
Yes, theory of relativity. As well as the theory of multiverse, is that you literally have an infinite amount of possible worlds that are always instantiated to some capacity, in which the one that we are partaking in is only one of the many multiverses that happen in different dimensions. That there is no singularity to being. There's just multiplicity. There's just change. There's just randomness. There's just potential.
Because I think it's interesting. He never mentions Parmenides once.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That is weird. Because Plato does quite a bit, but he doesn't.
But what's Alcmaeon?
I'm not too familiar with that one.
Okay.
What does he say about that?
Alcmaeon also seems to hold a similar view about soul in reference to Heraclitus, and the soul is constantly and is just constant, is change.
So I know that's where we get like the alchemy and all that stuff from.
That's Alcmaeon is alchemy.
That's where we get that
word.
The name. Yeah, the name. From.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because we were changing elements and everything.
So he says that it is immortal because it resembles the immortals. Mm-hmm. And that this immortality belongs to it in virtue of its ceaseless movement. For all things divine, moon, sun, the planets, and the whole heavens are in perpetual movement. Mm-hmm. So that the soul partakes of the divine in that it is always changing.
Yeah.
And if something, well, I guess if something is perpetual flux,
yes,
it never ends.
Yeah, it's infinite.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the soul would be infinite.
Yes.
Or immortal in that it partakes of constant change forever.
Yeah,
always, and is never constant.
Yeah,
because to be dead is a constant.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. There's two more. Hippo, which I think is really funny that he says of more superficial writers, some, for example, Hippo. Does superficial mean the same thing, or is that just?
Yeah, I think it is.
He's just. Yeah. Is that an insult?
I don't know if that'll be an insult per se. It's probably insulting, but I think he's just being.
Oh, okay. Because I don't know.
Blunt.
Okay, because I don't get the feeling that he cares enough about what people think about what he's saying that he would be
right. Yeah,
attacking.
But, yes,
I didn't know if it was like a little taste of polemics or something.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is, but I don't think it was to be mean for the sake of being mean. It's just a more.
This is true. Mm-hmm. And I don't care how you feel about it.
Yeah,
okay.
But just kind of like if you're going to talk about the. I don't know what were they called, like the American philosophers were the pragmatists. Mm-hmm. That's a superficial philosophy because there's nothing deep about it. There's just what works, right? And
and I do think it's interesting that like something if we had writings of Aristotle's, something like he says that Hippo has pronounced it to be water. They seem to have argued from the fact that he or the seed of all animals is fluid, for Hippo tries to refute those who say that soul is blood on the ground that the seed, which is in the primordial soul, is not blood. Another group, Creatus, for example, did hold it to be blood. They take perception to be the most characteristic attribute of soul and hold that perceptiveness is due to the nature of blood. And then nothing else about what that means.
Yeah.
Like I have no clue why they're arguing about blood and water.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if there's any other thing that he's ever written about that. But
I mean, there might be, but I'm not sure.
Because I feel like if this was a much longer, especially with how dense the arguments are in this 55-page 8.5 by 11 PDF, that didn't make any sense. But Creatus says that an example of a group that would say this is Creatus, but they take perception to be most characteristic attribute of soul.
You're right, yeah.
And that would be a relative position.
You're right, yeah, it would be.
Because I was like, ooh, relativism.
Yeah.
Okay, so but this he starts to say that like there are the marks that characterize the solar movement, sensation, and incorporeality in this theory, I guess. All those who divine the soul by its powers of knowing make it either an element or constructed out of the elements. So that would be materialist. All who acknowledge pairs of... Okay. One second. All who acknowledge pairs of opposites among their principles construct the soul also out of these contraries, while those who admit as principles only one contrary of each pair, either hot or cold, likewise make the soul some one of these. So it's like it's almost like he's critiquing how everybody is reducing the soul to material or to false dichotomies.
Yes, right.
Which is literally the same exact argument that people are making now.
Well, like I said, like this first book is pretty much like reading Phaser's book.
Literally.
All over again.
I mean, it's like 20 pages or whatever. But
it is, yeah. But I mean, he's just
it's the same format.
It's the same format, and it's also just the same arguments that people are making now. Is either you have this emergent theory of the consciousness, the way that like Sam Harris has, where he thinks that it emerges from properties of physicality, whether it's the synapses of the brain or whatever, and they're just saying that it derives from certain elements of your body, which is going to be either fire, earth, water, or mist.
So he talks about movement and like indirect movement and direct movement. Do you have anything to say about those as far as? I'm only asking you because if you have a monologue to give about any of the details I hit, I'd like to hear it. But, so he's talking about he's asking. So the next question we would have to ask. What question would have been answered by all of these accounts would be what soul consists.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
In that if it's material or not material or what element or whatever.
Yeah.
They would say whether like if the soul is constant change, it or is in its essence constant change at its most basic formulation, then it would not consist of anything. But then if you like Democritus would say that it does consist of atoms, or then like Hippo would say that it consists of water, or what was it? Was it Diogenes says air, etc. Then he moves on to say, how is it moved? Does it do the moving? Is it moved? Which means changed.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Does it? How do you define? Well, what's the problem of change?
Yeah.
I think to define.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to just go Aristotelian right away and then just ignore what everybody else would have to say.
Yes. So the problem of change is the essentially that you have this phenomena that you see something. I guess our interactions with corporeal world is that things are never really constant, right?
Yeah.
Is that things grow, things generate, they decay, and so on and so forth. Even us, or even just take a plant, for example. You have a seed, and a seed has all these physical properties, and then it grows into a tree, and then you still claim that it is the same object, even though nothing about it really is the same besides, I guess, if you look at its genetic makeup or whatever. But other than that, every visible quality about it is quite different. And, including with any predication you do, its height, its weight, its mass, whatever it is, its color, its habit, its quality. Everything about it is different. Even its quantity has different leaves, it has branches and everything. So there's so many things different about it, but we still claim it the same object. And so the problem of change is the attempt to reconcile this phenomena that really doesn't make any sense, because it's either deriving something from nothing, meaning that for something to change, it necessitates its rejection of what it was prior to it. And so if this bottle is here and it changes to this position,
that would be locomotion.
Yes, it would mean that by definition is no longer here, but it is there.
And so something about it has changed.
Yes, something about it changed.
So movement. But so that was the thing to me. I had to ask you kind of exactly what they meant by movement.
Yeah.
Because when we say movement, it literally only refers to spatial change, essentially.
Yeah,
about
like
the
locomotion,
change, which is literally locomotion doesn't mean, because then like locomotion is like wrong. Because is this partaking in locomotion, or what is locomotion in this sense here? Like if this glass moves, is that locomotion? Because locomotion sounds like place to me.
No, it means movement, like physical movement.
Literally moving from one point A to point B, whether
or
not it's moved or it does the moving. Because now I would say that people, if you were to say locomotion, is something moves itself.
Right.
Like a locomotive is a vehicle that moves itself, and that's why it's named locomotive.
Yeah. But the word motion, I mean, and a lot of this is just a translation, because then in Latin they use the word motus.
But, for locomotion?
No, for what they're talking about in terms of motion.
Motion.
Yeah, motion or
movement.
Yeah. And so what they're really meaning is just change, and that things change, that things can grow, things can decay, things things have all these different ways of just changing. Yeah. And so change necessitates non-being. And that's just a reality of what change is.
Because non-being is that which is not.
Yes, and so you cannot change without non-being. So when something, when you change from a child to an adult, by necessity means that you're no longer a child, that you're not a child if you're an adult. And once you do that, you bring in the concept of nothing, because you're a not that. If you do locomotion, moving from this to this, to be in point B means that you're not in point A. Generation is the same thing. It means that at one point you were not and now you are. Decay is the same thing. Is that you
you are not now and you once were.
Yeah, you once were, right? Yeah. And so change always encompasses in itself an idea of nothingness. And so the problem of change is that how can we make sense of that? Like, what does that mean? Because what is nothing?
Yeah.
Like in reality, like try to define nothing. Give me a definition of nothing.
That which is not.
What does that mean to be not?
How else do you say it? Like
that's the problem. The only way that we understand the word not or nothing is an association of something or isness. Is that it is the lack.
It's contrast.
Yes, that it's the lack of not being. That's all it is. Yeah. And so we know what it means to be. We give properties of being. We could talk about in very positive.
So nothing
things.
Is the lack of anything.
Yes, nothing is the lack of being.
Yes,
and so that's the only way we understand the concept, because nothing by definition is nothing. There is no,
and you can't actually conceive of anything that is.
You can't. Yes, yeah. This is a term that we use that has no referent. Yeah. And so if you remember, words have meaning if there's a referent. Mm-hmm. The word nothing is kind of meaningless because it has no referent. We're simply referring to a lack. And if we had no thing at all, and then we cannot even conceive of the word nothing. Like the conception of the term is only a negation of what is. And so its meaning is lacking in anything. Like there is no meaning for the word not.
That's by design.
By design, yes.
Yeah.
And so this word not, we talk about it all the time. We say this is not that, but we're using a word that is unutterable, as Parmenides says. So this word has no meaning. And yet
is that why he says that everything is constant? Because you cannot particularly, nothing isn't real.
Yeah, nothing isn't real.
And change
partakes of
necessitates
nothing, so change is not real. And so that's the problem of change, is that that change is necessitating a quality that is incomprehensible. Okay. The word nothing means nothing.
And the reason I wanted you to talk about that is because the problem of movement or change.
Yeah. And so since we're talking about Aristotle, we do have to talk about Aristotle's solution, because it is the only solution that was ever crafted, or at least discovered,
that solved the problem.
That solved the problem of change. And that once we rejected Aristotle, the problem of change again arises.
Because that's essentially that's essentially the issue now. Is the problem of change.
Yes, we come back to the same problem because we rejected Aristotle. And
it's literally hylomorphism.
Yeah.
And change.
Change, yes.
Everything else.
Yeah, and he
conceptually revolves around those two things. Yes.
And so Aristotle formulated the solution to the problem of change. And so the solution was that, first and foremost, that the understanding of change is flawed. That change is not merely the derivation of something out of nothing, or the becoming of nothing from something. Rather, that change is only a reality in what is actual. And so all objects that are actually real contain in themselves ways that it also can be real.
So potential.
Yeah, which is potentiality.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of potentiality is crucial. Like you're saying it, but just because you've talked about it many times.
Yeah.
But the average person,
we haven't talked about it in a long time,
right?
So it's worth totally rehashing.
But like the average just educated person in high school, college, grade school, and everything, don't really get this conception. Okay. It is that there is. I think they get it intuitively because it is a very common sense idea, but they're not unable to articulate it, and so things that are existing in an actual state. Also exists in a potential state. And so when something is actually hot, let's say fire, or a bundle of sticks engulfed in flames, that bundle of sticks can also, while it's actually hot, is simultaneously potentially cold. And
because it can be put out.
Because it could be put out, right? And so that potentiality of being cold is inherent in the nature of what a bundle of sticks are.
In their nature.
Yeah, within their nature.
I'm just throwing in buzzwords that we've used over the months.
It's the same thing. Like a warm cup of coffee has the potential to be hot. It also has the potential to be cold.
But it has the potential to be there. It has the potential to be there. It has the potential to be full. It has the potential to be spilled. It has the potential of...
Yes. And so change is not actually a derivation of something out of nothing or nothing from something, or I mean nothing to something, but rather it is that the potential that's already in the actual state of its reality becomes actualized.
Which means real,
which means
current, present.
Yeah. And that's what changes. Change is the movement from potential to actual.
Because I think change starts to get a little bit harder to conceptualize when you start saying that like there's temporal potentiality.
Right.
That like this glass has potential to be now, but it also has potential to be now, and it has potential to be now, and it's constantly actualizing its potential to be.
Right, but if it is now, it cannot be both simultaneously potential and actual in the same way. So when something is actually hot, is not also potentially hot.
No, I know. I'm just saying that this is constantly actualizing its potential to be in each consecutive moment.
I guess I don't know what you mean by that. Because if it is in the state of actuality, there is no potential to be actualized anymore.
I'm trying to think of how to articulate this because we haven't.
Of its state of being present. If an object is present, it is not. It is not
for this thing,
potentially present.
Yes, I understand that. But if it is present now, in the moment that I say now, must it also contain the potential to be present a year from now? Like,
right, yeah. I mean, I guess that the problem with that language is that if it is a year from now,
because it is part of its nature to remain constituted as it is for that amount of time.
Right. Yeah.
And that would be actualizing its potential, because it's not. It's to say that this glass can remain structured as it is materially for that amount of time. It's not yet, but that's potential. And if it does last that long, then it's actualized the potential to be that long.
Maybe, but I guess the difficulty is that you're bringing in time. And that's not what... Once you start bringing in the notion of time, you have to kind of describe what time is then.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the difficulty, because normally when you talk about actuality and potentiality, it is always just simply talking about the present. For when you bring time as a new factor, what are you meaning? Because the future, by definition, does not yet exist.
That's what I mean. It's not actualized yet. I mean, it can't be. It's not actualized by definition.
Right, yeah.
So the past is not real. It's that which was.
Right, that which was, right. And the present is that which is not, but that which will be. And so things cannot, for one thing, things cannot actualize itself. So it isn't as if this cup is going to actualize itself later in the future.
No, I'm not saying that.
Things are always actualized by something external from it in a state of actuality. And so the reason why it is here is not because in itself it is here. It is here because there are other things in a state of actuality that allows it to be here.
Okay.
That has actualized it to be here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That's not answered affirmatively or negatively my question. But
no, I think it's a good question, but I guess
what? Okay, so this is the converse. So let's say this glass is here. Exactly like this.
Yes.
The wine, let's say the wine isn't moving.
Right.
But
then you have to ask the question, why
perfectly
is it
static. What about the wine glass is not changing in the same way that it can change in any other way, whether it's locomotive or
So there's
a diminution or a growth or whatever.
And so
what about it is not changing from this time now to being 5 minutes from now? What's not changing in the same way?
What's not changing?
Why is that not a change? Because it is correct that part of its form is existing in now.
Yeah.
But now.
So I think I know what you're asking. So
I think that's the answer to the question, is why that's not change. Why is its existence from one moment to another not change?
It is.
So that's what I was saying is, but if it's changed, then it has to be actualizing its potential to be in those moments.
Yes.
So maybe I was saying it wrong or something.
So there's two comprehensions of change here. There's accidental change, and then there's necessary change or intrinsic change or first mode or whatever. But and so accidental change are normally descriptions of its change of things of actuality that are not necessary to its existence. So, for example, my explanation of why this wine glass is here in an accidental way would be that I grabbed it from the back and I brought it over here and I put it on the table. Now, that's not necessary for its existence. It's only accidental. There are other possibilities that could have caused a change for it to be here, right? You could have grabbed it. Some hobo out in the street could have ran in here and grabbed it. There's many different ways that it could have been brought here, but those are accidental realities that could only really be understood through, I guess, empirical observation of the process of change. And then there's essential change, or there's essential motion, where the qualities that sustain it in the here and now are always in a perpetual state of being actualized. So, like, I don't know really the properties of wine, so let me just act like it's water, because I know the properties of water a little more.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a glass of water here. Now, what is it that's holding the water together? It would be H2O, right? It would be the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms. And then what's holding those together? You would say the bonds of the chemical compounds. And then what's holding that together, you would say maybe it's the atoms. And then what's holding that together, you would say is the subatomic particles. What's holding that together, you could say is the wave function, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Then you could keep breaking it down to the properties that are being actualized in a constant state within reality. Now, in that essential understanding, you can invoke the idea of time, because then you could say descriptively what is actualizing the state of this glass here that will also actualize it 5 minutes from now will be that those compounds that are being actualized by other things in a state of actuality are actualizing it still. Right? And so this is Aristotle's and Aquinas' argument for being, for God, is that fundamentally...
So what does that say about its potentiality to do so? Like, I'm saying that
it can only be actualized by something else in a state of actuality. That the moment you take the oxygen atoms out of it, it will no longer be there.
And maybe we can do something about time sometime.
Yeah.
And that might be interesting. I don't think a lot of people know what time is now.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of time, we're an hour and 15 in, and I've flipped to page 10 of 55. So. And I'm flipping. But
I think the viewers would want to kind of comprehend what we're talking about.
Yes, but it's not answering my question.
I guess I don't know why that's not answering your question. Because what is your question then?
So I'm thinking of all the potentialities that this bottle of Topo Chico has.
Only within reference of time.
Sure.
Okay.
But I want to know why this glass of Topo Chico can be hot, it can be cold, it can be here, it can be there, it can be broken, it can be...
So that's what I'm saying.
Those are all potentialities.
Yes.
Why is this glass... Why is the bottle being here and then time passing and it being here 5 minutes from now not somehow containing its potentiality in the same way as the others?
Isn't
as the other potentiality.
See, that last part, I don't understand what you're asking. So, why is it not containing the same potentiality?
Yeah, so these are potentialities. So it contains these potentialities.
Okay.
All of these things. So what I said. Well, we can just hot, cold, hot, there, whatever. Yeah, this is what broken.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
Upside down. It's all many different things.
Yeah.
Why? So those are. Am I using the correct language? Those are potentials it contains.
Yes, so this object contains those potentials.
So why is it's so formally speaking?
Yeah.
It could partake of hotness or coldness.
Yeah.
It could partake of brokenness or whatever the other thing.
Yeah.
Wholeness.
Whatever. Yeah.
Well, meltedness.
Yeah.
It could partake of right side upness or upside downness or sidewaysness or whatever.
Yeah.
What is there no such thing as thenness?
like a temporal future.
so this is... Are we coming up with a thing you haven't discussed before?
No, I think, I mean, it's possible, but
okay.
But I think I'm kind of grasping what you mean. So you're saying that
so
when you have
so
these,
but so
okay.
so that those the way in which this would become cold, or it is cold, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it becomes cold by staying cold, or whatever. Like you can say, because movement can be static. Movement is a change from one thing that then destroys the other. It's the destruction of one quality
what Aristotle is saying
by another.
It's not that. It's that it is actualizing.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
But or a maintenance.
Then it wouldn't really have changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know what, because we've talked about temporal, the one that's one of the qualities of a thing is the time in which it exists, because it partakes of that time.
Okay.
That present or whatever. So part of this class is it exists one of the like at 9:47 p.m.
Yeah.
What about it existing at 9:50 p.m.? That's a different thing of which it partakes formally, because it exists at a different time. Why is that not a change? Why is that not actualizing the potential, or actualizing potential in the same way as this becoming hot? I don't know. I just am not getting that part.
It is.
So I don't know what you're saying.
The reason why I'm saying is because the only way to understand that is through essential change, not accidental. So
okay. I thought you were saying I was wrong.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
It was like, why is that not?
No, I'm saying like
you are actually helping me formulate this better.
Yeah.
But
and so the other changes, like this becoming hot, is an accidental change, or this being here is an accidental change.
So that would be an essential change, though.
Yes, but what you're talking about is an essential change. So the essential change, reason why it remains.
So that is the way it's a different change than being hot.
Oh, it
okay,
is.
okay,
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
No, I just wasn't understanding why you were telling me that.
It's a good example though, because that is the kind of example then that leads to the argumentations for God. Is that it's only through essential change. Accidental change, there's always corporeal descriptions for that. The reason why something is hot, you don't have to invoke the God,
or being,
right? But you do have to invoke being when you talk about essential change, because essential change is talking about what is holding this thing together at all times. Okay. And that is being.
Okay. Yeah. I think I was misunderstanding why you were telling me that.
Okay.
I thought you were making an argument as to why I was being inaccurate.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what's wrong with what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah.
To get back to the thing, we can. I underlined in red what I think was necessary. So we were talking about change. So the species of change on page 7 of 54 are locomotion, alteration, diminution, and growth.
Yeah.
Which are moving, what we would call moving.
Yeah.
From one place to another. So it's spatial. Could you call that spatial change?
Yeah, spatial change.
Spatial change. Alteration would be...
like a seed growing into a tree.
Okay.
Yeah, you're altering, like, it's everything.
So if this could be melted into
as an alteration.
Melted into a
knife, a shiv,
penis sculpture.
A penis.
Whatever.
A dildo.
A glass dildo. Okay. That's an alteration.
Yeah.
Diminution would be just it's smaller. So does this technically have potential for diminution?
Yeah, I think you can melt it smaller.
But it would, for it to just be diminuate. Okay, so literally the space it occupies.
Yeah.
Would, if you just put this in a little ball, it's like that big.
Right, yeah, you can.
Okay. Which I don't know if it would necessarily would be occupying any less volume or not.
It wouldn't in terms of its mass, right? Just in terms of its shape.
Where it could fit. Okay.
Yeah.
And then growth is the opposite. You could melt this
and probably the other one, rather than using glass, would just be like decay. Yeah.
Because there are things that change to occupying less space.
Yes, yeah. And that's normally decay, like
like a bar of soap.
Yeah, or like an old man.
Yeah. Yeah. You literally have less mass.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are people are good examples, but
they smell.
But
bad.
he uses this as an argument for that if the soul naturally partakes in movement, it must have a place.
Right, exactly.
It must be somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The terminus and quem are the beginning and end.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Terminus is beginning.
Terminus? I'm going to have to look that up.
Because terminus ad quem is the end of a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Of a thing's if the terminus ad quem of a thing's natural movement is the place of its natural rest, similarly the terminus ad quem of its enforced movement is the place of its enforced rest. So it's like saying that the soul to partake in movement must have a place.
Yeah.
And he's answering whether or not the soul can be moved.
Yes.
Yeah. So the body is moved from place to place with movement of locomotion, which is what we said. This carries with it the possibility that the soul might even quit its body to re-enter it.
Right, yeah.
And with this would be involved the possibility of resurrection of animals from the dead.
Yeah.
So if the soul partakes of locomotion itself, that means it could leave it and come back.
Yes, yeah.
Is that what he's saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wrote a note, I didn't understand that. And I think I started, so anything I want to say on here, I underlined in red with highlighting, but I started, because he'll say, make an argument, and then he'll really eloquently go into an example.
Yeah.
I was highlighting just the arguments that I can just bullet point.
Yeah.
But that to whose essence belong the power of being moved by itself cannot be moved by something else except incidentally.
Mm-hmm.
But those whose essence belong to the power of being moved by itself cannot be moved by something else except incidentally. What does that mean? Can you break that down? Just as what is good by or in itself cannot own its goodness to something, owe its goodness to something external to it or to some end which it means. So it's like saying that if soul originates movement, it cannot itself be moved.
Yes.
Except only incidentally.
Mm-hmm.
What does the incidentally part mean? I think is because we're talking about direct and indirect movement.
Right. Yeah.
Change.
Yeah.
Alteration is the problem. Is we're using words that are colloquially used as one thing, but have specific definitions in this text.
Yeah.
When we say alteration, it literally means something specific. I can't say that movement is alteration. It's like, well, that's a kind of movement.
Yeah. But he means it more exact, like someone's altering a dress or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's just saying that if it is the originator of movement in itself, cannot be moved by another.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless incidentally.
I think
not directly.
Yeah. It's just that it cannot be directly moved by something. Okay. So
if the soul moves itself, it must be the mover itself that is moved, so that it follows that if movement is in every case a displacement of that which is in movement. Okay, sorry. If movement itself is in every case a displacement of that which is in movement, in that respect in which it is said to be moved, the movement of the soul must be a departure from its essential nature. At least if its self-movement is essential to it, not incidental. So that he's saying that if soul is moved directly, that is a departure from the nature of soul.
Right, yeah.
Okay. He then invokes Philippus, and Democritus. Daedalus and Philippus. Sorry, he's talking about he's essentially making an objection. He makes an argument that the movement of soul, if soul can be moved directly, it cannot occur materially. So yeah, he says that we may object that it is not in this way materially that the soul appears to originate movement in animals. It is through intention of process of thinking, which couldn't. Would that mean that animals that don't think can't originate movement? Because the thing that he does, that Phaser does, is he articulates other people's arguments so well you wouldn't know if he was making them or not.
Yeah, yeah.
If you didn't know where it was in the text. Anyway, do you know Timaeus?
That was one of the texts of Plato.
Okay.
Yeah. So Plato,
because he tried to make a physical argument as to how the soul moves its body.
Yeah, so in the text, Plato was, Socrates, because he always writes about Socrates, is speaking to Timaeus. Yeah. And that's really where, I think that's one of the major texts in which Plato writes about the soul.
Okay.
But about what it is, yeah.
Okay, can I just read it really quick then?
Yeah.
It is in the same fashion that Timaeus also tries to give a physical account of how the soul moves its body. The soul, it is there said, is in movement, and so owing to their mutual implications moves body also. So could that be parallel, kind of a parallelism kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're making a parallel argument in the Platonic text. Okay.
Yeah.
He moves into the arguments that the soul is a spatial magnitude. What is that? Do you know what that means specifically? If the soul is a spatial magnitude?
Just if its spatial magnitude means that it
if it occupies space.
Yeah, it occupies space.
Okay. Whether or not, so he starts talking about whether it can be spatial or a spatial magnitude, or whether it's a unity or multipartite is the word that he uses. Because literally this is just literally this guy says this guy says this guy says this.
Yeah.
And eventually we might just skip to book 2, because he really that's really when he starts to make arguments for things.
Yeah.
I do like that it is mind whose movement is thinking.
Right, yeah.
That the change that mind itself undergoes is thought.
Yes. Yeah.
And nothing else.
Yeah.
And it is I will say that, if anybody else were to read Anima in any translation, the mathematical explanations for the brain are, or not the brain, the mind, specifically, are really hard to follow.
Yeah.
So I don't know when he talks about whether the mind is circular or linear.
Right.
Because there was people who are like, oh, the mind is a circle. And he's like, well, if the mind was a circle, that means that it has no end and no direction, and it undergoes no change. Then you would have to think the same thing, and you'd have the same thought all the time. Because thought obviously has a point A and a point B, therefore it's linear.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the whole circular thing, normally people think, so sometimes I'm just being an ass, but it's something that it's very, I guess, axiomatic within geometry, that circle has no motion, has no direction, right? And so I absolutely hate the line lefty loosey righty tighty. It was like you're literally spinning in a circle. You go left at some point when you spin in a circle, then you go right at some point because there is no direction. You go up and you go down.
Because I know what you mean when you say it.
I really don't. Like when I'm trying to unscrew something, I'm like, fuck, would you do it again? And when some people say you go left, I'm like, you can't go left.
Well, your hand would be pointing left from this point to that point in relation to...
Well, it depends how you're holding it. Like if I start this way...
It literally doesn't.
It does. And depends...
That which was at this point is now on the left when you turn it halfway. It's very relative, I get it.
Yeah, because if you have a circular motion this way, when you're up here, you're going right. When you're down here, you're going left.
Yes.
And so there is no actual, and then when you're going this way, you're going up, and when you're going this way, you're going down.
Do you really start with a screwdriver like this?
At times.
That's stupid.
There is no direction.
What are you going to go?
Yes, because like, do you ever try to find the spot?
This is the least,
especially
the
with the
least
fucking,
white quality about you is your inability to understand righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
especially with a fucking wrench. Because like with
We
the
have
wrench,
so many tradespeople that listen to this.
you have like that hexagon thing.
Like, oh
and
my
so you have
God.
the wrench, and then you're
I'm
like trying to.
so glad I don't work with Jeremy on a job site. I can't imagine what else he wouldn't
I
understand.
do every because I'm trying to think of what's like, oh, fuck, which way to turn, it, and everybody says the same thing. You go right or whatever. I'm like,
Like a circle
yes, it
has
does-
no direction
I
in
say
classical
that-
geometry.
That's what I say every time. A circle has no direction. That does not help me because when you put in the fucking wrench.
Oh, what if
Yeah.
I did this for you? Mm-hmm. If something, okay, do you have a cylinder I can rotate? This thing. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at it from this direction,
Yeah.
for this to go left, it must rotate a certain way. So if you're looking at this and you want to unscrew something,
Yeah.
the way that circle would roll away on a surface is left.
No, that's linear still.
I'm talking about if you had a thing you were going to roll. If you're like, okay, this thing represents a ball. Mm-hmm. The way that ball would have to roll to go left is this way. He's handicapped mentally. Seriously. So tell me, okay. Yes. Watch.
Okay, yes.
I'm going to give you this.
Okay.
Nope, stop.
Okay.
I want you to imagine this represents a circle.
Yeah.
Make it roll that way.
Make it
Just roll it that way. Roll it that way. No, that's stupid. See, now you're just being an asshole.
No, I'm not. You want me to?
No. You. What? Watch me. Have you never done this? Watch. Amanda, you ready?
Yes, but that's linear.
But
You're
the
saying to
circle,
spin it. I spun
this
it.
part of the circle must now make contact with that side and that side.
I know, but
Okay.
it doesn't go that way. What are you talking about?
So if you're going to take that circle
Okay, yes.
and it's a ball and you want it to just roll over there, you're going to flip it that way. So that
right,
motion.
but that's looking at it in a linear sense.
Sure, then look at it. I'm trying to help you.
So like let's say that I'm trying to screw something up there and I'm upside down, right? And then I take the fucking wrench and then I'm trying to find the spot where it finally grabs, right?
Yeah.
And so it might be like right here. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, fuck, which way do I go then?
That way.
You say so easily, but
Yes,
like,
because you're handicapped mentally.
because now I'm like twisted, like I'm pointed this way.
Because
and I'm
I'm
like, which
able
way?
to
Yes.
conceive of that shape in space. You're not conceiving it of shape in space on a plane.
Right, yeah.
The plane is perpendicular
Yeah.
to the wrench.
Mm-hmm.
That circle, if it represents a circle on a plane, for it to go that way, it has to roll this way. So I'm going to turn my hand this way. You're not going to get it. You literally have a mental deficiency that keeps you from learning this.
But yeah.
It's one of your many mental deficiencies that keeps you from learning simple things that everyone else understands. But
Yes.
anyway, we have things. So there's soulless harmony, which is essentially describes soulless ratio. I think this is more entertaining than last time. But so we have soulless ratio. Jeremy's mentally deficient. Be nice to him. I feel like that was a really good way of explaining that. Anyone could learn that except you.
The rolling was not, because
Yes, it is.
I
No,
thought you
it's
meant
spectacular.
like the way you spin it to go a direction.
No, I said imagine
Yes.
that the cross section of this is a circle.
Yes, but it depends like which direction I'm at. Do you know what I mean?
If I had it like this, I could tell you what way to turn it because this is
But
perpendicular
not
to
if
the
I'm
wrench.
like this and I'm like trying to use a wrench. And then you're thinking to yourself, it depends.
You can.
Which,
He's just not getting it.
which direction this wrench is holding.
Yes,
then I'm
because
either going to
it's
go
not
left
you.
or right.
It's not relative to you. It's relative to the screwdriver.
Well, then that's even worse.
No,
because
it's
that
a
thing
plane
is circular.
perpendicular to the screwdriver.
Like there literally is no direction to the object itself.
Okay.
It's circular.
Okay, so there is soulless harmony, which is a ratio of elements. I feel like I explained that better than anyone could. Any person with a IQ of 70 would know how to do that. You have a guy in a motorized wheelchair that can only moan and can't use his arms.
Who can magically have a direction for circles.
Yes. You'd be like, okay, I get it. Okay. Anyway. So what is the soulless harmony? So you're literally talking about all of this, and then you don't know righty tighty lefty loosey. A circle has no direction. It rotates in a certain direction.
Since I was a kid, it's like people were saying that
it rotates in a certain direction. It rotates in a certain way.
Yes, like you can rotate it in a certain way. But in every way that you rotate it, doesn't matter whether you go this way, you go left and right and up and down at some point in its rotation.
So clockwise and counterclockwise. What about that? Counterclockwise,
right,
untighten, clockwise, tighten. What about that?
That could help.
Do that then.
And it's always with my direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so even if I'm upside down, it'll be counter.
Yeah. So counterclockwise is to untighten. Clockwise
so even
is to
if
tighten.
I'm like reaching underneath.
Yeah.
But then I go clockwise.
Would drill it in. Unless it's the other way.
Right, that's what I mean. Because like if
unless the thread is literally different.
No, but like let's say that I am over an object, right? And like that there's a screw underneath the table.
Yeah.
I would have to go from my perception clockwise to go counterclockwise. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. But that's what my point is that you're always going to go one or the other because there is no real direction.
Yes.
That's what
the left and right part is relative to the top of the circle.
Yes, yeah.
Which apparently you just can't understand, but it's the top of the left or right, whatever.
Yes.
It's very simple, but I'm just trying to skim. We spent so much time talking about that. I found Aquinas' source of dualism in here.
Oh, did you? I told you, yeah, it's in that one. Yeah.
So it seems to be an independent substance implanted within the soul and to be incapable of being destroyed. And I was like, ah!
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going through here. I think that instead of going through literally every single line of this.
Because we already went through them.
We did.
In a different way with them.
So what are the ways in which before... What are the ways that we were conceiving a soul? So soul can be... Not can be, but was considered to be material. Material. Was considered to be mathematical, which doesn't make sense to me because...
Which it's a type of functionalism. It really is. It's a function of mathematical equations in relation to objects. And so their
function is to execute this equation.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Well, what is a number? Really quick. I actually wanted to ask you what is a number. It's just that which represents a certain quantity?
Yes.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because he was talking about how can soul be number, and I was like, oh, that sounds like it could be different than how I would define it.
Right.
Is it getting cold again?
I'm good.
Can you turn the heater on again? You can put it on me or Jeremy. It's going to be on me. It's the Grant Show. So we have that, and then the different materialists would say whether soul is air or water or earth or fire or whatever. No one would say it was earth because this is earth to them, like the physical matter of things. I don't think they're going to hear that. Maybe an audio engineer could put it on their studio monitors and be like. So soul is the soul as a harmony was interesting because soul, whether or not it was harmonious necessarily, I think is what he meant when he said it was a harmony. There's just all these different ways of considering the soul, where the soul was, if the soul was part of the body, if it was material, it would have to move with the body. If it was if it was just change, it doesn't necessarily have to move with the body. And then he starts to make arguments as to how soul is not moved, and then we get to book 2. Yeah. So hour 30 minutes, we're at book 2.
Yes.
And we have.
And I think before we move on to it, I think one thing that's really important to think about is that since you're thinking about the soul as the animating principle, that's something that really cannot be denied. You cannot deny that we are animated. Right, you could either say that everything's illusory.
Well, you look at a person, you say they literally move under their own power somehow.
Yes, that there's a difference between a living organism and a non-living organism. Now, either you could say that
because it's apparent that Amanda sitting there does not require something colliding with her to move.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
and so.
Because you can move a wine glass, but it can't. If you left this here,
it's going to be there. Yeah.
Experienced nuclear war and the fallout killed everybody, this would stay here.
Yes, yeah.
Essentially,
unless the wall came down and moved it. Yeah. And so that's just important because I don't want the audience to think then, well, why are we talking about the soul? And again, I think a large part of this is because you can't really think about the soul as a substance. You have to be thinking about that we are animated things, and that as a given reality. Obviously,
and then the other question
there's
would be like,
an animating principle. So what is that animating principle? We cannot deny it unless we're going to be extreme skeptics who say that everything's an illusion.
Because but then another question might be like me and my dog are both animated.
Yes.
But our capacities of animation are obviously different.
They're different, right? Yeah. And so that's why he's not going to just throw away the notion of the animating principle. He's not going to throw the notion of the soul or the anima.
I wrote it down. So viz means videlicet,
okay, yeah.
which means videre licet, which means it is permitted to see that blank.
Yeah.
So from this, it is permitted to see blank.
Yeah.
One might observe this.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I was like, I knew it was videre something. So videre licet, videlicet.
Yeah.
Viz.
Yes.
Okay.
Viz.
Okay. So book 2 says, let the foregoing suffice as our account of the views concerning the soul which have been handed on by our predecessors. Let us now dismiss them and make, as it were, a completely fresh start, which is what Phaser did. Endeavoring to give a precise answer to the question, what is soul, i.e. to formulate the most general possible definition of it. And from then, the first thing I underline here is, it is obvious that the soul is actuality in the first sense, which is necessary. And what's the first sense of actuality?
I think he just means that in a first sense of what the soul is, it's going to be actuality, not potentiality.
Meaning that it is actual.
Yeah.
That of knowledge as possessed, for both sleeping and waking presuppose the existence of soul. Because sleeping is being unconscious, and for one to be unconscious, it must be potentially conscious.
Yes.
And of these, waking corresponds to actual knowing, sleeping to knowledge possessed but not employed. And in the history of which he does go quite in depth on that. In the history of the individual, knowledge comes first before its employment or exercise. And then we go into knowledge.
Yes.
If then we have to give a general formula applicable to all kinds of soul, we must describe it as the first grade of actuality of a natural organized body.
And so I think, a large part of this, like some of the notes that I've taken, is that you kind of have to understand what matter and form is. So much of book 2 is basically covering this, right? Yeah. And so let me see how I kind of run in there. So although we abstractly separate the two intellectually, we cannot actually speak of any substance without the compound unification matter and form. Matter and form are not two independent entities, but rather a form is an act, or what is actual, while matter is potent, which is potential. So all substances are actualized potential. So when Aristotle speaks of form, it's not a substance, but a power, the power of actualization. And this is why every substance that is sensible are predicated, meaning it has a location, color, size, shape, quantity, and so on and so forth. So there cannot be a substance that is formless. Even if you encounter a blob, the blob takes the form of the blobness. So matter alone, as being purely potential, has no predications. So no location, no color, no size, no quantity, no anything. So if an object is sensible, it is matter, and it is matter that is formed. And so when we look at animated objects, basically there is a specific type of form that the matter takes. However, this is not to negate the fundamentals of its form, and that meaning that every atom and placements of electrons and so on and so forth, but that a living organism has its form in the same way that an inanimate object has in its fundamental sense, but there is more to the living organism. That the predications of the living organism body is associated with the principles of living. Now, the different powers of living organisms include vegetative powers, such as consumption, food consumption, excretion, reproduction, growth, and decay, and so on and so forth. And these powers found in living organisms are the fundamentals that distinguish animate from inanimate objects. And so, what the kind of like notes what I'm giving here is that, that these are basic fundamental principles of matter and form. It's a holomorphic idea, and so you have the singular reality, where there's a substance, which is living organisms, and the living organisms in themselves have formed matter, and that the formed matter, basically the matter that is formed, is directly associated to what it means to be living.
Does unformed matter mean that matter that does not partake of form in any way?
Yes, which is
not possible.
Not possible, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically pure potentiality, and pure potentiality, without anything being actualized, is nothing. Is that there is nothing that's purely potential,
because it is not actual.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so when we think of the animating power, when we think of the soul in the sense that Aristotle was talking about as being the form of the body, it's not so much in the Platonic sense that you have this invisible body that enters the physical body and then kind of animates it and moves it and drives it as a vehicle, but rather the matter that is formed, that makes up whatever the body is directly associated to what it means to be alive, such as the heart, the brain, the circulatory system, and so on and so forth. That there is a codependence between what is forming the matter as well as the matter that is being formed. And that there's a direct correlation with what it means to be alive, both materially as well as the powers that allow it to be alive. And I don't know if that's mucking it up a little bit, but
no,
yeah.
Because I literally just read what has soul in it differs from what has not.
Yeah.
In that the former displays life.
Yes.
Like literally was just reading that.
And so it's kind of sensible, right? It's that if you see somebody and you rip out his heart, he's going to cease to be alive, because the physical formation of the heart was formed by the form, which is going to be the soul, which is going to be the animating principle. And so you cannot live without the heart. You cannot live with the physical components that was formed in order for it to be alive. And so the animating principle is directly related to the objects to which it formed. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of the way he's describing it, because what he's essentially saying is that, the entire first book is spelling out such convoluted ideas. Like you have to be convoluted to say that the soul or the animating principle is mathematical. You have to be convoluted to say that you can reduce the psyche, you can reduce the animating principle to some kind of particle, whether it's the atom or whether it's fire, whether it's air, whether it's earth, whether it's water, that the explanations get so complex that they're not really common sense anymore. It's like it's obscure. It's like, what do you mean by mist? That the animating principle is air. And so he's saying that all these other theories that is posited is unnecessarily complex, because we can say that it is true that the animating principle of a person is directly related to his body, to the physical components, but the physical components are not purely matter that is not formed, but the physical components take up a form. there is a heart, there is a circulatory system, there is blood, there is a brain, there are these things. And so the actual physical components do not exist as pure matter, because pure matter is simply potential. Rather, the physical components take up a form. And so while it's already taking up a form, it's already partaking in this dichotomy of form and matter. Mm-hmm. And you cannot separate these two. You cannot say, I'm just going to look at the material.
It's so... One thing I should comment on at some point that I wanted to, and one impression I got while reading this, which is unrelated.
Yeah.
We're right on page 20, so we're a third of the way through, and we'll start to breeze faster once it's just arguments. But I was struck by the eloquence and coherence of something this old.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm obviously known. That'd be an interesting way to, like, when we were talking about knowing, like last week, like if I knew that after kind of what you could call the initial fall of the West.
Yes.
500-600 years ago, after the result of the Protestant revolt and all that, and like how they banned the teaching of Catholic texts, which in essence banned Aristotelian thought at all, or the Greeks at all, because the Catholic Church had incorporated many Aristotelian ideas into its interpretation of theology and stuff. I knew that caused a reversion. Yeah. Or or could you say a reversion?
I would say, it is.
A reversion to
pre-Socratic.
No, I mean nothing.
Yes.
If you no longer have, like, the Western world for 1500 years operated with a concept of hylomorphism as a basis for understanding reality. Yeah. Which was the answer to the problem of change. Yeah. And the problem of the mind-body problem and all of these different problems. And then on top of those solutions, 1,500 years of philosophy were built. Yep. But once you only have, because the Bible itself says nothing about this.
Right. Yes.
Nothing. Yeah. Because it's just narrative. I mean, it's not just narrative, but it is a narrative.
It is, right.
It's not a philosophical text. Yeah. You no longer have, if all you have is the Bible, you no longer have access to all of the philosophy that exists peripherally to it that might help interpret it. Yes. And reading just this, I was like, oh damn. Like, this is how bad it is, that this was written 300 years before Christ lived. And then we've gone 2,200 years since this was written. Yeah. And this is more coherent.
Yes, than anything.
In its logic than anything being written now.
You can read like Chalmers and be like, there's something incoherent about it. And you read Paul and Pat Churchland, it's the same thing. It's like you're not. And the funny thing is that then when you read a text like this and he's talking about Democritus and he's talking about these other materialists, it is like, wow, the contemporary theorists literally have taken theories that were prior to Socrates and Aristotle, and they're upholding it as being more accurate than that. I mean, they're taking really ancient theories and just remodeling them to fit contemporary lingual and dialogue and understanding of.
It's like Polio was talking about Heraclitus. And
yes,
But no, I just was struck by, I was like, literally, listener. So 2,200 years ago, we resume our inquiry. This is translated, but this is, translated pretty literally. We resume our inquiry from a fresh starting point by calling attention to the fact that what has soul in it differs from that what has not, and that the former displays life. Now this word has more than one sense, and provided any one alone of these is found in a thing, we say that our local movement and rest, or movement in the sense of nutrition, decay, and growth. Hence we think of plants also as living, for they are observed to possess in themselves an originative power through which they increase or decrease in all spatial directions. They grow up and down, and everything that grows increases its bulk alike in both directions, or indeed in all, and continues to live so long as it can absorb nutriment. That was written 2,200 years ago in original text, but still, just like... It's like, damn.
Yeah, I remember when I first was reading it, I had the same reaction. I was like, wow, this is more coherent than anything that I read when I was in undergrad and shit.
So from this point, he moves to sense.
Yeah.
Because he does talk about nutriment for a little bit, which is, you said vegetative.
Yeah, vegetative or nutritional. I mean, it depends on the translation, but yeah.
Is the soul's power to absorb other matter and incorporate it into itself.
Yes, yeah. And to shit.
Because he has an entire discourse on literally the nature of food.
I know,
what makes food.
Yes.
I was like, this is so intense. But he essentially says animals are living things that have sense. Living things that have sense.
Yes, the sensory.
Yes. So that means touch, taste, sight, hearing.
Yes.
Is that it? Are there only 4? There are 5.
There's 5.
Hearing.
There's touch, smell.
Smell.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So touch, taste, which are related but not the same. Hearing.
Smell was related.
Well, sight, hearing, smell.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find my little thing here. Where we live and perceive the 2 meanings. Okay, so he actually talks about 2 meanings of perception.
Yeah.
That because to perceive, what is to perceive? Is because you can. What sense and perception is perception to interpret the senses.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can't I was going to ask you. I thought it was interesting that animals are that which sense.
Yeah.
And touch is the most basic sense. So what is a Venus flytrap? Is that an animal that consists of plant matter?
I don't think he would say that.
But have you ever been around one?
Yes.
It senses touch.
They're unremarkable.
I'm just curious how about what about
I think because
I don't know if you've thought about a Venus flytrap.
I have actually, quite a bit, and that's why I think I was so annoyed when I finally found one, because I only read about them and everything, but in reality, when you actually read the text on it too, the thing about the Venus flytrap is that they actually don't have the sensation of touch. It's more of a lever that is pushed that kind of clamps things down. So there's no central nervous system.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the thing about touch is that it requires a central nervous system.
Talking your mic just a little bit more. I'm trying to also.
Yeah. And so, touch just requires a central nervous system.
If I turn my monitor down,
where you have the action potential sent somewhere in order to feel that sense. While that one is more of a mechanism, the same way that most plants have it when they pollinate. It's like even like when a bee goes in, there's tons of that clamps down in them and they pollinate and they get all that shit on their backs and they go. It's
the way with the bee.
Yes, yeah. And it's the same thing with Venus flytrap. You have to put enough pressure on it. Like I put my finger in it. And first I was like trying to touch it kind of lightly, it didn't do anything, but you actually have to press on that lever.
So I was just curious.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I'm glad that you have an answer.
Yeah. Because I was thinking of like the like Mario Brothers. I thought it was going to be more like that.
And he then defines, because he talks about animals with sense, so that the soul is originative of thought, life, perception. So it must be essence, he says. Since it is soul by or with which primarily we live, perceive, and think, it follows that the soul must be a ratio or formable essence, not a matter or subject. So that would just mean that
it's not a subject.
It's formal. It's not. It's
not. And that is an act. And so that's what I was trying to say from the very beginning, is that we cannot think of it as a substance. And so a subject is a substance. And that's something that's really important to, I think for the listener to understand, is that, when we think grammatically what a subject is simply referring to a substance. You have a thing and you label it as a thing and you have a name for it. The psyche, the animating principle, is not a subject. There is no thing that exists that is the soul.
To say it's a subject,
yes,
is to say that it can be thought of by another thing.
Yes, yeah.
Or it can be
that has properties. Yeah. Is that it's a substance then? Once it's a substance, it's a composite.
Well, then he was saying that it must exist in a place then.
Yes,
one of the, I don't remember who was making the arguments against who, but he was saying essentially that Phaser was saying last week that what's the thing where that the mind is sentences in the brain?
Right, yeah.
What is that called? I don't remember what it's called. It's like it's a linguistic theory of mind or something.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a word for it, and I'm not going to remember it. But essentially, if that's true, that thought is sentences, then you should be able to observe them somewhere in the brain.
Right.
Like if the brain is the center of the mind, and that the mind consists of sentences that exist in reality, then it must be observable somewhere.
Right.
Because everything that exists consists of substance.
Yes, exactly.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
It partakes of form.
Yeah.
But if for something to be without substance, it has to be only formal.
Yeah.
Okay. But then he also says that, what did I say? So potential can only be actualized in accordance with the nature of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that a soul can only embody that which is capable of being sold, is the word used in British, which is the most British word in the whole piece.
But that's what I was trying to say in the beginning is that's what it means, that when you have when you have a body that is animated, it has physical components that's already formed for it to be animated.
Yeah.
And that you can't really separate the form from the matter. Is that and so there's a direct correlation with them, and this is something that's obvious, I think, in a common sense sphere, is that, if I rip your brain out of your head, you will die.
Yeah.
Like you will no longer be animated. Mm-hmm. And that's because there's a direct correlation with your brain and you living. There's a direct correlation with your heart and you living. And that that none of these components we can talk about.
Did the idea of reincarnation exist at this time period?
Well, yeah, there was theories about that. He's rejecting it, but yeah, there's theories.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know he's rejecting it. I was just curious. He then goes into the different powers of soul in the hierarchy in which they exist, so that we'd have nutritive, appetitive, sensory, locomotive, thinking. Yes,
and then the intellective.
Which is the intellective. Yeah. Which is not the word they use in here, but I'm sure in some better translation they would use that. But but then he said, so that there's the nutritive, which is essentially the power of the soul to feed itself, to feed the body.
Yeah.
Because that's an animation.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That's the most basic animation of which plants partake.
Yeah. Same thing with reproduction. I think normally they put in the nutritive sense.
Yes. So reproduction, and is they say nutritive in this, but reproduction, that the most basic thing a thing must do, means an act it must partake of, is eating and reproducing.
Yes.
So plants do that.
Yep.
They absorb, or whatever word you want to use. They incorporate other matter into themselves as a body. Yeah. And then grow.
Yep. Yeah.
From it, they incorporate the matter, and then they also. I actually really liked the point that he made. I don't know where he made it, but he said that the could you say that he would say, that Aristotle would say, I know Aquinas would say, but that the goal, essentially the end, which I guess you could say the teleology of a living thing, is to partake of God.
Yes, yeah.
Which means to partake in the divine, the eternal. And the way that things partake of the eternal is to reproduce.
Yes, that's one of the ways.
Yes, because it's the way they don't get to exist forever, but part of them does, in that they reproduce.
Yes, yeah.
Then the appetitive is desire.
The appetites. Yep.
The appetite. That's not desire, because desire requires
it's different
thought.
Yeah.
But wish. I think the words that they use are probably a little too British in this.
Appetite is actually used all through the scholastics, which is different from desire. The desire normally pertains to the will, because
appetite is that the bodily.
Yes, it's just a beast of fucking. Of the appetite. It's just like the
not just eating, but enjoying.
Yes,
food.
yeah. It's like the instinctual,
the lesser goods.
Yeah, lesser goods. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the instinctual act of those things rather than the willful desire of those things, which is going to be a higher level of the intellect.
And then Aristotle does a lot to describe how those interact throughout the text, the appetites and will. I think I tend to think in more scholastic terms, just talking with you.
Yeah.
But if I start to replace these with scholastic terms, it starts to make more sense.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
I think by nature of my interacting with you and talking to you constantly, I just think in scholastic terms. And even though I've never really read a scholastic, I mean, I've read like a little bit of Aquinas and Augustine. Anyway, so he starts to talk about those. And then he does make the point. So there's this hierarchy of soul, which are the powers of soul.
Yes.
Which most basically everything that is alive technically has a nutritive soul. Yeah. Vegetative soul is what you said. Which is when we say someone's in a vegetative state, it's literally that they can consume nutrition.
Right, yes.
Reproduce.
I guess you can't get them hard and fuck them, I guess.
What's that lady's name who was in a coma forever?
Did she get pregnant?
No, I don't know. What was her name?
Jerry Shivo?
Anyway.
Yeah. I guess you can fuck them. And
fuck Jerry Shivo. Okay. It's like Tracy Shivo. Anyway. Then there's the sensory, which is the ability to sense. And see, hear, etc.
And then part of that is the problem-solving skills as well. It's basically like the sensory soul is I think I wrote it here a little bit.
Talking to your mic.
Yeah. Sorry. So these powers pertain to the beast as well as man. Beasts have a central nervous system and allows sensation to occur, and they can see, taste, smell, blah blah blah, on objects. And I guess they can associate objects in relation to other objects as well as relation to themselves. And so beasts can determine what is edible. They can communicate with each other. They can, for hunting, for play, for mating, and so on and so forth. So the sensory power opens like this sense of comprehending reality in a very different sense that the nutritive soul doesn't really allow that to happen. Yeah. And so part of the
because I'm trying to think of the way that he describes the nutritive. It's something a living thing that only has nutritive soul just springs up from that where it is.
Yes.
And just that's it. So like a plant, if you're growing flowers in your house, it has no power to sustain itself. Only passively. It has there's nothing. Right. It will just die if you don't give it water and whatever.
Right. That while beasts have, the sensory soul, they're able to communicate with each other.
So what's the difference of the appetitive and the sensory?
Yes.
What might have the appetitive and nutritive soul but not the sensory? Like, I'm just curious because he doesn't do a whole lot.
He doesn't,
about
right?
That.
Yeah. I don't know if there's one that does without the sensory. They normally have them both.
Okay, but he makes a distinction.
Yeah, I think he makes a distinction.
Okay.
But I think the ones that have that kind of the appetite for those things also have a sensory power. And so with the sensory power, it allows them to have basic problem-solving skills. It is hungry, it's going to hunt. It's going to dig, it's going to eat, it's going to, do whatever. It needs to play. So you see like little baby cubs playing and stuff. And so it could sense objects, and it could comprehend basic, I guess, relation between objects and themselves. So they could walk away from danger, they could do whatever. Yeah. But it is not like an intellective power, because the intellective power...
Well, there's a perceptive power before the intellective power.
Yeah, the perceptive power, right.
Because to perceptive power, how is that different than sensory power? Without appealing to intellective power yet.
Yeah. I think it's when you begin to be able to predicate the substance. And so if you just have the sensory power, it is like...
Because what is a dog? Does a dog have a perceptive power or only sensory?
I would say they have a perceptive. The same thing with a higher...
well, because let's say I think the difference. So because perceptive would also be locomotive. I think is another way of saying it.
Yeah.
It's the sense that would move you away, or because to perceive implies, because you can sense something, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm perceiving it, because perceiving implies interpretation of what I'm sensing.
Yes, yeah.
So my dog, if I approach him in a certain way, he's going to sense that.
Yeah.
But he's interpreting my movement to refer to something that might happen directly.
Yeah. And I think
to him.
I think that's why many beasts do have a perception. It's like they could tell when you're angry. They could tell if you're scared or if you're hopped up on cocaine or whatever. It's like they
couldn't know if you're hopped up on cocaine.
Well, they kind of know your behavior.
Intellect, but
no. If
that would require an understanding of what the form of cocaine. I'm trying.
What I mean.
I'm trying to be accurate.
I'm sorry. What I mean is that if you're a regular drug addict, the dog normally.
Well, they can tell when something's wrong.
What they normally know.
Different.
If they have the habit of seeing you drugged out all the time, they actually change their behavior when they perceive that you are again high.
Yes, but they don't know what high is.
Of course, they don't know what high is, but they know. Okay. But they could associate your behavior with that.
Because when you literally say they know when you're on cocaine, it's like they don't know what cocaine is.
No, they don't.
Anyway, but they understand the pattern of alteration.
Exactly,
and they can anticipate.
Yes, especially if they see you do it. If they see you smoking weed, if they see you snorting cocaine, it's like many dogs.
They know what's going to happen.
They know what's going to happen.
Understand the pattern.
Yes, yeah.
But they can't tell you what the pattern means.
They can't. Yes, yeah.
Or what causes the pattern, or of what the pattern partakes, which is what the intellective power does.
So the intellective power then is the one that's the most...
I didn't mean to be pedantic, but I was like,
different.
A dog doesn't know you're on cocaine.
Yes,
a dog knows that you have a pattern of alteration of behavior, and it can anticipate it.
Yeah, and they associate it with
certain stimulus.
Yeah. They're associated with whatever stimulus it is. Obviously, they're not going to sit there and call it cocaine, but they see this powdery substance, and they see you snort it all the damn time. They know what's going to come once you do it. But yeah, and so. The intellect then can begin to understand the categories in a very, concrete way. The predicates, and so that's why the three fundamental laws of logic is the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, and the law of excluded middle, and that's because. The first, like the most primal step of being rational is the ability to predicate the subject, whatever that subject is, right? So when you have...
Which requires understanding the form of...
Yes, yeah. And so they see somebody and you could say, this man is sitting. And the ability to predicate that is what allows reason then to begin to develop. And that's like the first steps of being rational.
Because I think a good example would be let's say you sit at a certain desk at work.
Yeah.
Or wherever. And every day the same person, when they walk by your desk, they whack you in the back of the head.
Yes.
With a flower vase or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't require that you understand what a flower vase is or what he is or what it means to whack or what it means to walk past you or why he's doing it for you to flinch every time he walks by.
Yeah.
That's what perception is. It's once you do the other things, that's when you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
You are employing the intellect.
Yes, yeah.
And that's literally, the intellect refers to intellective power.
Yes, yeah.
But then he says to define thinking, we have to then define everything in the hierarchy all the way up.
Yeah.
And so we already talked. I don't really think we need to say any more about the nutritive power. Nutritive power is just the power of the soul to feed the body.
Yeah.
Or to incorporate matter. And what it means to feed is to incorporate that which is not the body into the body to sustain it and grow it.
Yeah.
Is that a good definition?
Yeah.
I mean, Aristotle literally spends like 2 pages about feeding, what it means to feed, which I think I just synthesized well. And then he moves into, he says that I think the way he says it in here is that which senses must have appetite.
Mm-hmm.
Because sense directs one towards which one wants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know exactly how he says it, but to sense is like the touch / taste.
Yeah.
Like subtext taste. Sight is the next one, hearing and the smell.
Yeah.
But then he goes into extreme definitions of each sense.
Right, he does,
and
yeah.
I was curious.
Mm-hmm.
One second. So I'm thinking about touch. He actually doesn't go into touch until later.
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually explains them in a reverse hierarchy,
Mm.
if I remember right.
Yeah.
Sensation, apprehend. Okay. So he defines sensation as apart from thinking by saying sensation apprehends or from knowing.
Yeah.
Is knowing. Well, knowing is in multiple senses from what he says. Because there's potentially knowing and then actually knowing, which is to actualize knowledge.
Yeah, yeah.
What he differentiates sense by, or in an example, in that sense apprehends individuals while knowledge apprehends universals. So what one could say is that sense identifies objects without any understanding of form, and then knowledge apprehends the formal reality of the thing, and then it can understand that thing's relationship to being and how it, etc. So sense does not require that one understand what a thing is. Like for me to sense red, I do not have to understand what red is. I don't have to just purely. Like a beast, essentially, does not, like when a bull reacts to the matador's red cape, it's not the bull seeing red, going, red means this thing, and that's what a cape is, and when they do that thing, this thing, it's red, and it just red, like it just is like the sensation of red makes the bull mad, and it reacts a certain way to redness.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's true or not. It's just kind of like a cartoon example.
Right.
But when a dog, dogs perceive, which is a little, well, I mean, bulls would have to perceive, but it's the same idea. It's just like just a reaction to a thing.
Right. Yeah.
But it makes because if I hear a sound, which we'll talk about later, what hearing is, I was amazed by his articulation of sound and sight. But if I hear a loud bang sound, I immediately go, it was a gunshot, it was a car crash, it was something falling over, it was a mirror breaking, it was all these different things. If my dog hears a loud bang, it goes away. It just is, it flinches
it's like danger
and goes away. And it's like, it's not even loud sound go away. It's literally that his body in sensing is just repulsed.
Yes. Yeah.
Almost as like a physical.
Yeah.
Just, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
But when he talks about sight, can you explain Aristotle's concept of light and transparency? Do you know about that? His physics?
A little bit, but yeah.
Okay. So the object of sight is visible, which means can be seen.
Yeah.
And what visible is color, or a certain kind of object which can be described in words but which has no single name. So the thing that can be seen purely is just the quality of the sense of sensing something visually. And he says that all visibility is color.
Yeah.
So when someone sees in black and white, they're actually seeing all color or no color.
Yes, yeah.
Which is interesting, but whatever is visible is color, and color is what lies upon what is in its own nature visible.
Yeah.
Every color has in it the power to set in movement what is actually transparent. And it was at this point that I was like, Aristotelian physics is crazy. So then he's like, okay, so when he says every color has in it the power to set in movement what is actually transparent, that power constitutes its very nature. That is why it is not visible except with help of light. Mm-hmm. You can't see something transparent unless light is passing through it.
Right. Yeah.
It is only in light that the color of a thing is seen. Mm-hmm. Hence, our first task is to explain what light is, and then he goes into a discourse about what light is.
Yeah.
By transparent, I mean what is visible and yet not visible in itself, but rather owing its visibility to the color of something else.
Yeah.
Which I think is actually quite accurate.
Right, yeah.
A window is only visible in that you can tell that you're seeing something through it.
Right, yeah.
Because if you can't tell if you're seeing something through it, it's not a window, because then it's just a solid surface that you can't see through.
Yeah.
It's just a panel of wood or something.
Yeah.
You know, if a window's not transparent, then it isn't a window. It's just not. It's opaque, which means you can't see through it. Light, as it were, the proper color of what is transparent, and exists whenever the potentially transparent is excited to actuality by the influence of fire or something resembling the uppermost body. For fire too contains something which is one and the same with substance in question. And I would say that is he equating light with fire, because fire produces its own light?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so light is the presence of fire or something resembling fire. Mm-hmm. That darkness is the absence from what is transparent of the corresponding positive state above characterized. That darkness does not exist without light. We start to get the sensory quality, the things that there's sound or no sound, there's light or no light.
Yeah.
Or, that obviously, I mean, physicists now would laugh that you even had to explain that sight is dependent on light.
Yes, yeah.
What is capable of taking on color is what in itself is colorless, as what can take on sound is what is soundless. What is colorless includes A, what is transparent, and B, what is invisible or scarcely visible, i.e. what is dark. Mm-hmm. B is the same as what it is transparent when it is potentially, not of course when it is actually transparent. It is the same substance which is now darkness, now light. Mm-hmm. So he goes into a discourse about what color is. It's like we're talking about what color is in relation to what soul is. The fact that there's an interesting thing that that it's almost like when I enter a discussion of philosophy with somebody.
Yeah.
And we're talking about what is good. Mm-hmm. That's a very basic thing. You don't have to refer to anything outside of metaphysics to determine that. They always return to science or mathematics, which means actually to go out from it. Mm-hmm. When you do it, so the hierarchy, so the mathematics, are physics dependent on mathematics, or are they separate? Because both are dependent on metaphysics.
Right, yeah. I wouldn't say it's dependent
on
it.
It's almost like a V.
Normally physics use mathematics as a language to describe whatever physical properties.
Okay, but so they're they have a correlation, but they're both dependent on metaphysics.
Yeah.
If the bottom point of metaphysics is truth, and we were to... that science ought point to metaphysics, which points to truth.
Yes, yeah.
And then mathematics ought point to metaphysics, point to truth. So if you are having a discussion of a metaphysical concept and then transition from there in your explanation to mathematics, you're actually moving farther away from the truth. In a way, I have had it's especially when you start to, or if you reduce your concept of good to some kind of political theory, that's you're moving away from the goal. You're actually moving from that metaphysics to that which ought be explained by metaphysics.
Yeah.
Out that way.
Right, yeah.
I don't remember why I was saying that. But anyway. Not everything that is visible depends on light for its visibility. Then he talks about animals with hard eyes. like fish.
Yeah,
Have like
yeah.
hard eyes.
Yeah.
Eyes that don't shut. You can see them in pure darkness.
Yeah.
Can you see fish eyes in pure darkness?
No, I think he means that fish can see in darkness. Doesn't he?
No. He says that you can see fish's eyes when it's completely dark.
I don't know. I've never tried. But I know fish normally can see in darkness.
And then... So his whole thing of color and light is really just worth... I just think, especially if somebody's into like physics now, just go back and read like Aristotle's physics about color and light. It's like fascinating.
Yeah.
Because both sound and hearing, which we'll get into, are dependent on air, movement through air.
Yeah.
That if the sensory organ... If you take the eye and the cones that we now know exist within the eye to see color, or whatever, the rods and cones or whatever, it would have been just the eye. If you take this thing and put it right on the sensory organ, there's no color.
Right.
It requires the transmission through air of whatever you're sensing.
Yeah.
So hearing just... I was thinking about it. I was amazed they were like, he was talking about like the inner structure of the ear and stuff. And I was like, physiology's that old. He's talking about the swirls and the stuff inside the ear, and he has the cavity and stuff. But if like hearing is caused by two bodies colliding, always.
Yeah.
That we would know that there are sound waves, but waves are not produced unless there's some kind of...
Right, yeah, there needs to be...
what's the word?
Something to cause the vibration.
There's a word I'm thinking of, displacing force. Like there's this, that which is stagnant in air, whatever. I'm using Aristotelian languages, is displaced by the collision and energy produced by the collision. That's why like soft things don't make an audible sound, because it doesn't displace enough energy or whatever to cause sound waves or whatever. But like if you just, without moving it, because I was thinking like, if you place a phone on the eardrum, if like all the little tiny micro movements caused by your arm twitching or whatever are going to make sound, but if you literally just place this on the eardrum and there's no movement at all, you wouldn't hear sound. So it's literally perceptive of movement in some way. That like your eyes don't see color if you place the color of the thing that is from which you are sensing color on the organ or whatever. But then, he talks about like actual sound and potential sound, and like a thing can make sound or is making sound. His explanation of echoes is way beyond its time, I'd imagine. That echoes are caused by when so sound in air, air can only make sound if the air colliding with air cannot dissipate, because it must be a body. So if two masses of air hit each other, they might make a wind sound because they're colliding, and they don't just automatically become homogeneous, that there's some kind of exchange of energy and force or whatever. But when he talks about echo, an echo is the non-dissipating air moving back. The sound can't escape. Whatever, which I think is just true. They were calling it tympanic membrane. Is the eardrum.
They still call it the tympanic nerve.
It's just like, wow, this is like 2,500 years of physiology. This is crazy.
I think what's interesting about like most of his description of sensational process is that even though I think a lot of people normally just start talking about how, it's outdated compared to the contemporary descriptions of
but I don't think the essence of what he's saying.
That's what I'm saying. But
different.
But essentially, it's actually not. It's just the specifics. We understand it better now. We understand more, but like the essential nature of what those things are, he's not, we still say that you cannot see without light. I mean, that is an essential property of sight, is that you need light. The essential property of sound is is vibration that's normally caused by force of some sort.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So all of
it's just the fact that he understood that.
It's amazing.
In its essence.
I know, yeah. Is that we actually have not moved that far from it besides having a better description of its efficient causes. And that's really it.
Then he also differentiates between acute and grave sound. So right, acute would be loud and quickly affecting. Yeah. And grave would be less loud and affecting over a longer period of time. Which I don't know if we could think of examples for that, but he says that there seems to be a sort of parallelism between that, what is acute or grave to hearing and what is sharp or blunt to touch, which I think is just metaphorically common sense that like that which is sharp and that which is blunt, they're both equally as touched but affect the senses in different ways. While what is sharp stabs, what is blunt pushes. And then he talks about voice, and voice is sound produced in the windpipe that also requires soul or thought. Soul? Voice is a kind of sound characteristic of what has soul in it. It's like birds have voices. But if I go... that's not voice. Right, yeah. But if I'm talking, that's voice. Yeah. Because it has to have some kind of perceptive quality or quality of thinking or... Yeah. Like if my dog screams because I run it in a certain way, that's voice. Yeah. But if he just sneezes or coughs or whatever, that's... Right. Is this the part you're less familiar with?
No, you're just covering it. I mean, it's not that...
You glaze over and then you stare down here somewhere. You look down and I'm like, is he zoning out? And then he talks about smell, and they were not capable of explaining smell nearly as well because they didn't have any ability to observe tiny particles in air. Right, yeah. And he also says that smell is less significant because we have a bad sense of smell. Yeah. Men have a poor sense of smell, and our apprehension of its proper objects is inseparably bound up with and so confused by pleasure and pain, which shows that in us the organ is inaccurate. Yeah. Is he saying that we react so instinctually to smell that it's hard to attribute as much soul to it, animation to it? Or thought.
I think it's just that it's deficient compared to our other senses, as opposed to some animals like dogs.
Which I think is just, they teach you that in biology class in 7th grade. Like, dogs have a better sense of smell.
Yes, that's all I think that he's saying, is that there's...
I think, if I remember correctly, humans and birds of prey have the best sight.
Yes, yeah.
Those two.
Like, sight is our main sense that we use. And then I think the secondary one will be sound, and then it's...
not touch.
Not touch, I don't think. There's other animals that have a better sense of touch than we do.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm just like hitting my... Oh, I thought it was really interesting. I never thought about it. Is we only smell when we inhale.
Yeah.
Like you can't smell anything unless you breathe in.
Right. Yeah.
Which I can't imagine is different from again, my dog. It's just like, I think that's a good example of dog and person, right, what we're differentiating. But they have to they smell to inhale. Yeah. But what he's saying is that there's no reason to believe that there isn't some kind of sense that he didn't yet understand that.
Right.
Would just. Well. Aren't there plants that like perceive certain molecules in the air and then react?
I have no clue, actually.
I think there are. I don't know if I have any examples, but I think that there's certain plants will do certain things if there's the presence of certain compounds in the air. Yeah. And I don't know if you can call that touch. I don't think that's touch. I don't know how that would differ from smell. But anyway, he says essentially that that smell is a harder one you can't really. I think we know now what causes smell, but I don't think that he's wrong in his final conclusion that smell is much less accurate. Especially thinking.
Yeah.
Seems that our reaction to smell is much more primordial than the others. It doesn't require as much.
Yeah.
We just we can't. Your ability to hear a sound and go, oh, these are all the possibilities of what that is. Like a dangerous sound or whatever, you can go, all the things I said earlier or whatever. But if you smell a bad smell, you're much less able to discern exactly what it is you're smelling, aside from the fact that it's bad.
Yeah.
Which does not differentiate that is not as strong a basis for thought as the other ones, because our reaction to it mirrors the way animals react to, or beasts, I guess, react to sensory stimulus without thought. Like the way that we react to smell, if I were to smell something bad, there might be a general quality of burningness that I know could, in this space, only come from the oven. Something is burning.
Yeah.
But if I'm just in a space and I smell something bad, it requires that I understand a lot more about the space and what could be making that smell than just hearing glass shatter.
Yeah.
I know what the sound of glass shattering is better than I know what that specific analogy would be in scent. So it doesn't, we just kind of react good, bad in more of a similar way to the way beasts do than we do with sight.
Yeah.
Because when I see something, I can almost tell you what it is all the time.
Right.
There's nothing I see on a daily basis that I can't tell you what it is.
Yeah.
But smelling, I'm like,
yeah.
We don't know. It's just not as accurate a way of apprehending the source of a sense.
Yeah.
Then he goes into taste, which is really odd, because he says, so what can be tasted is always something that can be touched, because obviously it's a tactile sensation that you have to place something on the tongue to be tasted.
Yeah.
It's not because with the way that sight and hearing function, you can be within reason any distance from a thing, and as long as that the light is powerful enough from the thing, or that the collision of the thing is powerful enough, you can hear that thing I can hear a gun fired miles away. I can see the color of the lights at an airport miles away, but taste it has to come in contact. So it's opposite.
Yeah.
There can be no distance. There's no, they have to be in contact to be sensed. So touch requires the absence of any intervening body. That there can't be anything between you and the thing. But he says something about that which it can be tasted must potentially be liquefied. Which is odd, because I think it would be true.
Right.
Anything we taste is being liquefied on the tongue in some sense, in that it's matter that we taste is being salinified into the saliva or whatever, because that's why he says if your tongue is too dry, you can't really taste anything.
Yeah. Because
it requires liquefaction. So as he starts talking about how taste partakes of water in a way that, again, the physics thing. The sense of privation is different, and the way that you can private color is different than you can private taste. Because for color to go away, you just lack light.
Yeah.
But for taste to go away, it's just you're no longer in contact. You just water. It's it's a different. The element of which it partakes is a different element, because you're not in contact, or there's not enough. He says there's too much moisture or too little moisture in the mouth, an imbalance.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if he would make sense of that by you can't taste when you're sick because there's too much moisture, which is why your nose is running and stuff. And then he goes into touch. And like, so whatever can be said of what is tangible can be said of touch and vice versa. If touch is not a single sense, but a group of senses, there must be several kinds of what is tangible. Because the difference between touch and, I think this is probably the part I comprehended the best, which
Yeah.
I don't know if that's obvious. But the difference between sight / hearing and touch is that sight senses primarily levels of light.
Mm-hmm.
It's just light and darkness.
Yeah.
That there's that color is just variations of light and darkness, and that hearing hears sound or no sound or whatever. Mm-hmm. But touch does not require this, is not dependent on the same dichotomy of form or whatever. I don't know how you want to say that, but touch, because I can touch something that's hard or soft or rough or smooth or hot or cold, or like it's not just based on a dichotomy purely. And that presents a different problem. And it talks about whether the organ, because there's arguments as to whether the flesh is the organ, or whether the sense organ is below the flesh somewhere, through which the different movements are transmitted is not naturally attached to the bodies. The difference of the various sense organs is too plain to miss, but in the case of touch, the obscurity remains. So like, they're talking about, is the organ like a membrane over the skin, or is it the skin, or is it the flesh below the skin, and all that? Because it's not obvious that if you cut someone down to bone, they can feel all the way down in. So there's kind of a question whether, and then like he goes into the relationship between taste and touch. That because taste is reliant on touch but is not present throughout the entire body, which can sense touch, then they must be different. Because if they weren't different, then we could taste all over our bodies.
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to like read these things quickly so I can keep the arguments and organized. But yeah. So flesh and tongue and the tongue are related to the real organs of touch and taste, as air and water are those of sight, hearing, and smell. So the nature of the way that the organs interact are different. And it is interesting to me, his I just never had thought about like, oh, it's not a matter of touching the thing you're smelling to your nose to smell it. It's that there's some relationship spatially. There requires a transmission or a movement of whatever you're sensing from the thing to you in both sight and smell.
Yeah.
But not in touch.
Yeah.
Which he goes over many times, but and yeah, he goes back into like that touch doesn't require the same dichotomy of light and dark or whatever as seeing does. And then all of these, everything he says here, which I think we're getting into book 3 here finally, which is it a conclusion to the whole thing? I didn't necessarily get the sense it was a conclusion.
Right, yeah.
Which I think is by nature of the fact this would have just been an academic outline. Like you said in the beginning.
Yeah.
2 hours and 36 minutes ago. But so everything that was said about senses before this, the following results applying to any and every sense may now be formulated by a sense is meant what has the power of receiving into itself the sensible forms of things without the matter. So that the nutritive soul is that which has the power to incorporate the matter of another body into this body or whatever, incorporate and grow or whatever and sustain itself. But that sense is superordinate over that because it can, what is the word that he uses? Receiving into itself the form of the thing without matter, because you receive the form of the fake brick that's red without integrating into your own body any of its matter to do anything with it. And that would lay the groundwork for perception, which is book 3. Thinking, which I think is perception and thought, are in book 3.
Right. Yeah.
Did you have anything to say about any of it? Am I doing this justice? Is it?
It is. Yeah. I mean, but I think what's more important, than just like particular.
Because that's really all I didn't really.
Yeah.
And I think that he expands on particulars here because he continues to talk about specific senses in book 3.
Right. Yeah. But I think what's most important about it is just it's more of the general case that he's making that you can't separate the physical components of I guess of our bodies and the formations in which our bodies take with our intellect, with our or at least with our animating principle, and I think more than anything that's the important aspect of these I guess descriptions that he has about sensation, the descriptions that he has later on about perception and everything. It's direct relation to thought and everything. Is that you, without the physical components, you don't have thought. Without the physical components, you don't really have perception or the intellect. And so they're all kind of related to one another. I think he's just making a very detailed description of the holomorphic reality of how we exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then he goes into an argument about how there can be no sixth sense.
Right. Yeah.
Which I don't get. Is there something you can talk about? Do you understand? Are you familiar with it enough?
No, I mean, not really.
Because what he's saying is like, there isn't because all our senses all together allow us to, because without understanding necessarily, we can, I don't know what the word would be. It's not integrated. You're not integrating it. To interact with, because the nutritive would be to interact with matter without any other. You don't have to.
All of them are interacting with matter. I think.
No, I'm talking about the
right, but I think the simple understanding of why we can't have a sixth sense is that you need a corporeal correlation with whatever the sense would be.
Yes, it's that our senses allow us to sense all that which can be sensed.
Yes, but it's because...
And he was saying that to sense more than what the sixth senses can, we would have to have some organ that can sense change.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Is that there's a correlation between the organ and the sensation process. And so if we don't have...
movement, rest, figure, magnitude, number, unity. You literally would have to... For there to be the only other things you could sense are movement, rest, figure, magnitude, number, unity. Like there's just... There's the qualities that you could sense. Right, because when you're sensing something, you're sensing its quality.
Yeah.
That way in which it is, not that of which it is.
Yeah.
Or you could say that of which it is. You're talking about form, but like that of which it consists materially. That to have a sixth sense, it would have to sense something more than what is purely qualitative in an unchanged organ. Okay, so that does make better than me. And he starts talking about special objects of the senses. That one sense organ can't sense both cold and white at the same time. That there's just not that they. Let me see if I can. We're getting into like a very quiet mode here because this is just purely argumentation. He's just talking about the distinctions between the senses and that they can't sense what the other. Since it is through sense that we are aware. All right, I'll just go to the next part. Since it is through sense that we are aware that we are seeing or hearing, it must be either by sight that we are aware of seeing or by some sense other than sight. So I know that I'm seeing you.
Mm-hmm.
So it is either by sight itself that I know that I'm seeing you, or by some other faculty.
Yeah.
And the sense that gives us this new sensation must perceive both sight and its object, viz. Color, so that there will be two senses, both percipient of the same sensible object, or the sense must be percipient of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So then he starts to transition into like what mind is.
Yeah.
This isn't, I think you explaining as an academic outline makes this a lot more sense, because I remember finishing this thing and being like,
yeah,
he didn't say what mind was specifically.
Right, but he's basically saying that the mind cannot be simply another sense.
Do you think that we can summarize book 3 in just a conversation about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, because fundamentally, since there is no correlation between another sensory object, whether it's like the nose or the eyes or whatever, the mind cannot be reduced down to a correlation of another object within the body. And so since it cannot be reduced down to another object within a body, then the mind is not simply another sensational process. It's something different. And this something different is what is subsisting. This is something different is what is subsisting more fundamentally with being.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is what begins to perceive. That is what begins to translate. That is what begins to actually have properties that in itself is not reducible, in itself that is not corruptible. It is simply the mind. And I do think there is something there.
Because it's the mind that makes sense of any
yes.
of the previous.
Yeah, it's one of the since I am very in agreement with this understanding, it's one of the reasons why ideas like mental illness makes no sense.
Which is something we should cover in a full episode.
Yes, because the mind is not like sensations can be corruptible, right? Your eye could go blind. Your tympanic nerve can die.
Well, a demon could be putting images in your head.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yes,
but a la Descartes.
Yeah,
your perceptions are not per se reliable in any sense.
Yes, but to say that your mind is ill is weird. It's like that you can't really say that it is ill. Corporeal things can be ill. Corporeal things can decay, but but the mind as being that which subsists in being cannot really get corrupted in that sense. In the same way, right?
Yeah, this is the paragraph that was like, yes, is this literally, this is the piece that where Aquinas got his dualism.
Yeah.
It's actual knowledge is identical with its object, which means that knowledge itself is the knowledge of this wine bottle itself, in itself, is the wine bottle.
Yes.
You would have to become it.
Yeah.
In the individual, potential knowledge is in time prior to actual knowledge. But in the universe as a whole, it is not prior even in time. Mind is not at one time knowing and at another not.
Mm-hmm.
What does that specifically mean? That mind is not knowing or not knowing at a given time?
It's because the mind is not a substance that is in motion.
Because then it would have to be...
Mm-hmm.
Well, it wouldn't have to be physical, would it?
It would have to be associated with something physical, at least.
It would have to have a body to be acted upon.
Yeah.
Because, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That all things that exist
in
existere or whatever consist of matter and form.
Yes.
And the mind is not associated with matter.
Yeah.
So therefore it must only be form, and form cannot change because it's form.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and we can do that more justice later. But when mind is set free from its present conditions, it appears as just what it is, and nothing more. This alone is immortal and eternal. We do not, however, remember its former activity, because while mind in this sense is impassible, mind as passive is destructible, and without it nothing thinks.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, that literally could be the line where
No, that's what,
where Aquinas was reading, and
so there's a deeper theology gets developed from that. But yeah, that's basically where a lot of the Thomistic dualism stems from. It's because in reality, what he's saying is that you have a mind, and the mind in itself is not moving. It isn't something as if the mind itself is learning. Your habits that your brain functions do is what's learning, right? And so you have brain functions that can be associated with your sensory and perceptive powers that you have within your your animation. But the actual mind, that which subsists and knows things, is not one that at some point did not know. It's simply that the mind is always geared towards being. It's always geared towards truth. It's always geared towards towards what is known already. And so our coming to know, like the actual changing faculties, is because we are embodied. We have a brain, and within the brain acts. The brain is a muscle, and it acts as a, I guess, transmitter of information. Through action potentials and everything that we understand now through the syntaxes within the neurons throughout the body, and that the mind, which is always subsisting within being, it is the actualization of the brain to come to, I guess, encounter whatever is already known by the mind, and that's really the way that is being viewed. If that, I don't know. If that makes sense.
It is. Yeah. So 2 hours and 50 minutes. Let's talk for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
About what conclusions one reading this would draw. Because what happened to me is I'm reading it, I'm like, wow, awesome. Like, I'm just like, really, what I was expecting is you have the first section. The first book is essentially all of these dummies before me didn't get it. The second is, let's start from the very basis of what it means to be alive, what it means to have soul, the hierarchy of soul, here's what the senses are, all that. And then I was expecting, okay, from this is what mind is. And then the third book is essentially just an expansion on senses and their interaction with each other.
Yes, but ultimately that these sensational processes are being actualized by the mind. By that which is subsisting.
But there wasn't like a conclusion that said that.
In some way, like the lines that you read that is concluding that.
I wonder if I was just like waiting for a reiteration that never came.
Right, yeah.
Which would have happened in class or whatever.
Yes,
I understand that this is not a, we'll never 100% know what Aristotle had to say conclusively about anything he was saying in long form, because it's all gone forever. But I just remember getting to the end of it and I'm like, I was waiting for...
Yeah.
Which eventually is kind of what Aquinas did.
Yes, It expands more on it.
Was Aquinas the first scholastic to specifically discuss Aristotle at length? He did?
No, that would be Avicenna. Or actually Al-Farabi, I think, before him.
I thought Avicenna came to the same conclusions, but didn't have... No, it was that Augustine came to the same conclusions.
Yeah, Augustine came to the same conclusions.
Without access. Yeah. But Avicenna lived at the time they would have been translating this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll have to decide where we progress from here. Because again, I don't feel like this question is answered for me.
Yeah.
What mind is. And I feel like that's the arc of this part of the season, is getting through all of this commentary.
Yeah, most of it is just telling you what it is not.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is a good way of understanding what something is.
Yes, and so it is weeding out why it's absurd to think that it is material, why it's absurd to think that
So what we did last week was...
Yeah.
Or to think that it's some kind of a dualistic unity of independent matter and form, which was not how they'd say it, but how I'm saying it now. But This is interesting. It's kind of turning into this little arc where we're like, okay, here's Phaser explaining what everybody thinks today.
Yeah.
Now we're going to revert, and then we have about 1,500 years of weeds to weed through.
Yes, yeah.
Until we reach
Aquinas
and the people directly after him.
Yeah. But yeah, but fundamentally that I think the strong conclusions he's claiming that it isn't material, that it isn't mathematical.
Okay, so they're not negative claims, but they're just claiming what it's not.
Yes.
Okay, that's true. I think he obviously does a great job of that.
Right.
But
and I think that then the strong positive claims is saying that the mind is subsisting in being, that the mind is something that is not that I guess is always geared towards that which is known. That which is true.
I really wonder if this was written exactly the same, but in scholastic language, if I would be understanding that better.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's fundamentally what he's saying, is that the mind is not that. I think the other positive claims that he's making is that, that the mind or the animating principle is the form of the body, and that the body is already formed through the actualization of whatever the matter is in a proper formation that allows for, I guess, life to exist at all, right? In order for it to be animate. And I think all those are very strong positive claims and argumentations that he's making. But fundamentally, that the mind is eternal in that sense. That the mind is eternal.
But am I correct in not seeing a moment where he explicitly goes, "This is the mind"?
No, I don't think so. I think you even read quotes that right now that he said what the mind is.
Or qualities of the mind.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say
he's explicitly saying what it is. He is saying that it is that which knows.
Okay, so I would just have to conclude that from what he's saying.
No, I mean, the literally...
Because that's not how I'm interpreting.
I know, but literally the words that you said, that's what he's saying. He's saying that the mind is eternal. I think that...
okay. So that's a quality of the mind.
Yeah. It's a positive quality, they say. It's not just via negativa. So
okay, but he's... Okay. So what I'm saying is accurate, but I'm not using the right words. How I'm understanding what you're saying is accurate. But
and he's also saying... What else do he say? Is that the mind is that which knows. Right?
Yes.
And so that's, again, an affirmative claim. That's not a via negativa claim. That's
no, I understand. I know what you mean, but there's not a... He doesn't just describe the mind at length without the rest of the via negativa stuff.
I don't think you can, because the mind is not a substance.
Okay, so maybe I'm just not used to this kind of argumentation, because I remember finishing it and I'm like, I'm like waiting for something else to tie this up for me.
Yeah, because I mean, you can't speak of the mind as a substance, and I think that's at length what he's saying. So how can you speak of the mind? Yeah. You have to speak of the mind as a power.
Well, if the mind is only formal, you can only describe its qualities, because it is only quality.
It's only an act, right? It's only actualization. Yeah. And so, since it's a form of reality, it's a form of the body. This is what it means to be that. It cannot be like an affirmative substance. You cannot say, therefore, the mind is the brain, or the mind is the locus of the brain, or it's existing as a homunculus in a brain, or whatever. It's
Done it.
Yes.
I got a message about that one. They're like, I don't have any idea what you guys are talking about. I don't know either.
Yeah.
Anyway, you'll decide sometime this weekend what we'll cover next week.
Yeah.
I hope that was. I will say, I just as a. Well, so we have anything else to say about this?
No, because we're getting into that.
Aristotle's De Anima, books 1 through 3.
Mm-hmm.
I understood this a lot better than I understood. I mean, Phaser obviously is very intelligible, but like this made way more sense than.
Yeah.
Remember, this was much more easy to concentrate on, just reading wise, because there's no fluff at all.
Yes.
I wanted to mention really quickly that I have actually been asked by people who do not follow us on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
This is in fact on YouTube. We do put these videos up.
Yes.
Because there are like a bunch of people who just like happened upon the show. They were just like searching something on Apple Podcasts or something, and they're just like, interesting cover art, and they just listen to it we haven't really mentioned that we're on YouTube. If you want to watch this, also, I have been asked on Instagram by people who watch the show and found me somehow through that.
Yeah.
I think they just searched my name, and then because there's not that many of people with my first and last name on Instagram or something, and they just saw my face was the same as the one on the art. But this, we do have a Twitter account, @contra_gentiles, where we gentiles. Gentiles, where we do accumulate all of our publications when they happen, etc. So if you want to follow us on Twitter, do that if you have not already. Do you have anything else you need to? Well, we finished before midnight today, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Anyway. We'll be back next week with something else dense. And we'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.